So I guess I will call the WSESD board meeting to order. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely. And some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote. So I am going to make an amendment to the agenda to include after the education tax rate, budget impacts, and legislative action. I'm going to include curriculum department upcoming changes. Okay, so I'm going to give 15 minutes for that. We're going to try to stick to it. We do have a presentation from Representative Emily Kornheiser. I don't see her here. I believe she's coming in person, but maybe she will be here in a few minutes. And so I'm giving her about 45 minutes between her presentation and question and answer. We're going to try to really stick to the times so we can make a quick meeting in a timely manner. Okay, so we are going to, are there any other amendments? Hearing none, we are moving on to student matters. 5 to 10 minutes on student matters. Is there any, I don't see any students here. Are there any students in the?
Jaden's.
Okay. Jaden, would you like to share anything with the board?
I don't know. I kind of feel like there's a lack of a lack of respect between like students and teachers. Like students don't respect the teachers or give them the respect that they need when teachers is trying to help, make sure the students is doing good and on track. And I feel like there's some teachers that really don't give enough respect to students and like their circumstances that they're under and like the stuff that they go through. And like I feel like if we can do a better job at like showing this like equal amount of respect to both students and like the teachers, and maybe like it will resolve a lot of issues that are currently at school.
I see that Mark Spino is taking notes over there. I'm not sure how he will work on resolution of that, but I'm confident that there's probably something in the works.
Yeah, I was just noting Jaden's feedback, and you see that Hannah's not here tonight, but happy to relay that to him. And Edmonton.
Thank you, Jaden. Are there any other students in Zoom who would like to share or question for the board? Okay, one more time, and we're moving on. Okay, so we are moving on. Thank you very much. If anyone else shows up, we can certainly accommodate them. So we move on to the administrative report. Mark?
Okay, thank you. So tonight we're excited to share. Do you have the slideshow, Paul? Our work around social emotional learning. And we do have multiple schools represented tonight. From the high school to BAMS to a number of elementary schools. So, first frame, kind of framing the work. Social emotional learning is really investing in our community and in relationships. Relationships are clearly so key in developing a community and that has clear expectations, that invests in systems development, that honors restorative practices, and certainly that invests in programs and curriculum that is research-based. So tonight you'll hear a lot of similarities amongst our schools, but also kind of get a feel for the individuality of each school as well. So as noted at the bottom, your feedback is incredibly important for our continued growth, just like how we framed the MLSS report a couple weeks ago. Really encourage you to share your reactions, your reflections, your wonders, your thoughts for next steps. Like everything, we're in a moment in time looking to continue to improve our practices. So if there are certain things that stood out, please share that with us. Tonight is very much kind of a broad stroke of what's happening throughout the school district, and certainly an opportunity to dig deeper later on. That being said, I think we'll turn it. I think Julianne and the Demerson team will get us started. The next slide.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm actually going to set my timer because I could talk about this a long time. So I'm going to turn my timer on. So I talked about developmental designs, I think a couple of years ago, and I first became trained in developmental designs, now I think it's 10 years ago or so or more, when I worked at BAMS. And so a pretty significant group of us engaged in the training at that time in order to make our classrooms more developmentally responsive and supportive to the diversity of learners we have in our school. And so that training was so important to me in my life as a teacher because developmental designs is not like a workbook with a program in it. It's not a curriculum. It's a set of practices that we know based on research and based on brain science work with children. So it's like a set of practices, some of which I used when I became a new teacher back in the last century, and some I started to use, in the last 10 or 15 years. But it's really a set of principles about how we form relationships with children and why it matters, and gives us consistent practices and language that we can use with each other, and a system so that we are making sure that all children are receiving these practices every day. So just to understand kind of what's at the foundation of developmental designs, it's based on the idea that when you build an environment, a learning environment, and you front load that learning environment for opportunities to have relationship, opportunities to have autonomy, time where students can feel challenged and therefore feel competent and successful, when you build in time for fun and laughter, and you have a safe environment where children understand I can get my needs met here in community with my peers and the grown-ups here in this building, you will create an environment where learning can happen. We know, and I think we've talked before in this group about how SEL and academic learning are not separate. They are not separate. They are one and the same. During a math lesson, SEL learning is happening. It's completely interwoven. There is no way to separate it out. So all of these elements need to be occurring throughout the day, throughout a student's day. It's not like, oh, now I don't have time for, no, it's something that you need to be thinking about. 2 years ago, I think, Demerson School did a 2-day training on developmental designs. This is actually our 4th year of implementing it. Just a couple of weeks ago before Thanksgiving break, we had the executive director come and work with us for a full day to really take that deeper and talk about the work of developmental designs as it applies to restorative practices, trauma-informed work, and resiliency. And the trainer, Jit Kundan, came, and one of the first questions he asked us is, well, what are you restoring at Demerson School? And everyone was like, you know, and because what he was trying to say to us right away is that, hey, you know what, today, you're not gonna learn like a 5-step process for running a restorative circle, or, you know, I think like other administrators have shared, and I know John Sessions shared a lot about this in previous years, restorative practices are not like this separate, you know, time that happens during the day. It's not just like a circle that you do with students. It's actually a set of practices, and everything we do during the day can be restorative and can be looked at through a restorative lens. So with developmental designs, in the next slide, you know, there are key elements that students experience. One is pre-K to 8, all students have morning circle. They have a common set of expectations in the classroom for how they reflect and plan together. There's a lot of self-reflection. There is a process for creating a social contract. Each year, students come together to create a social contract, and as I just mentioned, there are restorative practices around partnering with students so that they can solve problems, some of which might be conflict with peers, some of it might be breaking, you know, part of the social contract. Some of it may be just be like, how do I get to class on time? You know, those, you know, really partnering with students in order to make those plans. So the next slide just talks about that approach, is about community, actually understanding that when we come together as a community, we create guidelines that are best for the group, and the group needs to make them. Like, the best guidelines for a group are those that the group makes for itself. So there's a lot of, you know, civics in here. When we think about coming together for a social contract, you come and you form a social unit, you agree to renounce some of your individual rights for those that the group experiences. So in the next slide, you can see this year's social contract with students created is be inclusive, work together, and be safe. This represents our core values. And the social climate we are trying to create. It's our aspiration to be embodying this every day. You'll see this all over our school. And this is the foundation of how we do restorative work as well, because we are all looking to exemplify this and to work together to help each other stay on track with that. I am I've already run out of time. But I turned off my timer, true confession. Do you see that? Yeah, I know. But
That wasn't good.
so that's our students signed our social contract. It is designed to be very short and concise, something that you can remember without looking at it. It's not like a list of 100 rules. It is actually like something you can just think about. You see it, but you can also just articulate it. And we might have different interpretations of it. And that's the point. Like, that's the point. Like, we might have different interpretations, and then we would talk about that. And we really look at what does it look like to you? What does it look like to me? And how can we get on the same page? Just to end with this quote from the training we did. This is a quote from Gina Kundan. Schools are mistaken to believe they are the sole correct or right pedagogy source. Our students' pedagogy sources are their bodies, their minds, their souls, their community at school and away from school, their natural environment. To lead learning through this filter sets the tone for affirming whole and constructive relationship with self and others in liberating ways in our spheres. We are whole beings learning to use our heads, hands, and hearts to do no harm daily. So I will just end with that, because I know other people are going to dive into other kind of aspects of DD and other curriculum work. Thanks.
All right, hi everyone. I'm the principal at BAMS, and it was great to hear Julianne reflecting. When I came on board, Julianne was a teacher at BAMS, and I can't take credit as a principal for starting DD. It was my predecessor, Ingrid Crisco, but we've kept it going, and it's about as alive as it's been. One of the challenges with DD is it's a company that origins, and to do the full training, it's about a week-long training, costs a lot of money, teachers have to give up a lot of time. So And every time we turn someone over, we have to bring that training into new staff. So it's always hard to kind of keep up. But it's really great to have a former teacher at BAMS bring it to their new school. So I asked a couple of teachers to come and present a little about how some of the key components that we use at BAMS, certainly building on all the things Julianne shared. So I have Debbie Serafino and Ann Kaplinka-Lair, who's here. They're both Taurus teachers. They're 7th grade teachers this year. I don't know if you can
Pull up the, there.
Ann or Debbie, can you, do you want to just begin? You gotta unmute maybe.
I was going to
There it
let
is.
Ann start. If Ann is there. I'll start, and then if
Thanks,
Ann
Debbie.
comes on, she can join in. So we have 4 teams, 2 7th and 2 8th, and Ann and I are both on a 7th grade team, Team Taurus. We have been using DD really since I've been there at BAMS for 10 years. And it definitely promotes a sense of community, very much of what Julianne was speaking about, and I can attest to how great it is. In advisory every day, we have the circle of power and respect, which is great because when you form a circle, it's really about equity, where every student is equitable to each other. And so there's no leader, everyone is the same, including the teacher. And so we do that. I do it every day. I think most people on my team do it every day. The only time we don't is if we have our team town meetings. And then a lot of times we'll actually kind of do what we do in DD even on the team town meeting day. It's that powerful and that strong as far as promoting a sense of community. And I believe that this is the emphasis in the building. I think all of the teams follow that protocol, and it's the students who benefit tremendously, as well as the staff, the teachers. We use the practices of developmental designs in pretty much everything we do, teaching, everything. When it comes to like class management, we'll use the DD practices to do that. We use it for taking a break, which also I think helps social emotional learning, depending on, what is happening with the student on any given day. If they need a break, they can take a break. And there's no consequence at all. They just need a break and they're able to do that. And that is also promoting a sense of autonomy from in their perspective for themselves. So they're going to decide if they need a break, and that's totally fine. And then they come back and they're still in the class. They never lose class time, but they just can separate themselves to get some time to reset and come back. I'm not sure if Ann wants to chime in now.
Can folks hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think something was up with my headphones, but now, I'm happy to pick up where Debbie left off. So kind of building on what Julianne was talking about with some of those student needs, and one of those needs being student autonomy. I think the idea behind TAB or Take a Break is to have students build up their own self-regulation, which is obviously part of that social emotional learning, and having the adults sort of, in theory anyway, ideally facilitating that process. There's definitely times when I would say it's more teachers reminding students to do self-regulation rather than students self-regulating, but that's one of the balances that we have. And so if it's not working for a student to take a break in the room, we also have the tab out option of, we have buddy classrooms, at least at BAMS, where students can take a break in another classroom and fill out a reflection and then come back when they're ready to rejoin the group. And again, that's the idea, is to have students practice the self-regulation rather than having it be something punitive. And we don't really have a full-blown restorative practice at BAMS. I think that's something that we're definitely working towards, and something that I think would really benefit the school. But it's one of those steps in making sure that students are taking responsibility within the community. And then I think depending on the teacher and the team, there are lots of, I'm just timing myself, so I think we're getting close to our time here, but there's lots of routines that teachers can use. And I think Debbie referred to this a little bit about building those in early on in the school year so that everybody's on the same page and that students know what's expected of them. The idea is to sort of assume nothing and teach everything so that everybody's on the same page. We're using the same language, and that we can work towards those self-regulatory behaviors. And then another thing that's not necessarily part of DD, or developmental designs, but that BAMS prioritizes, I would say, because of the team structure, each team has different things that they do as a team, like the team town meetings that Debbie referenced, field trips, like our team is going to go ice skating in January. We did some ropes course activities with our SAP in the fall, and all of that really does support those relationships and social emotional learning. I don't know if there's anything, Debbie or Keith, that you wanted to add in.
No, thank you, Debbie. And I was just going to add, at BAMS, if you think about it, there's 28 advisors that start every day with a group of about 10 kids in a circle of power and respect. So that's pretty powerful when you think about that. So every day we do that, and it's a great way to kind of start things off. And it's a little bit of a challenge to make sure all 28 people are kind of following this model. And we work really hard to emphasize its impact on kids and positive start to the day.
I will say just one last thing as an advisor, it's pretty incredible to build those relationships over the 2-year loop and then have those ongoing relationships as students go into the high school and beyond. And if, at least in my experience, the last 2 loops that we've had with students, if you really do that circle with students every day with fidelity, it can really build a lot of closeness and connection and strong relationships within that group. Thank you.
Right. Moving on from DD, we're going to talk a little bit about second step. I have here Morgan DeRoja, who's the school counselor at Oak Grove this year, and Catherine Mason, former school counselor at Oak Grove and our current social worker. So we'll share a little bit about second step in general, and then specifically how that's looked at Oak Grove School. And then we have a sample lesson to take a look at that, Paul, you'll get to click through pretty quickly. And then some video, a video with some kids talking about their experience with second step. So we have been lucky this year that thanks to Bryn and Paul, we got a grant for to purchase the second step curriculum for all of the elementary schools. So it's currently used and at least available in all of the schools, the 7 elementary schools. It's a research-based social emotional curriculum, pre-K through 8th grade. We have been doing it at Oak Grove for 7-ish years. Catherine started teaching that right before I got there.
Yeah,
seems like
a year or 2.
Yeah. And so we've had school-wide implementation at Oak Grove for 7 years, and we've seen the progress that makes. It allows for a kind of this whole school approach to working around social emotional learning. And while it is a standalone lesson each week, teachers can reference it throughout the week. And so, as Julianne was saying, we can teach the skills one time, but we can practice it in everything that we do. And so that's the nice thing about it. Does give teachers the access to the curriculum, to what kids could and should be learning at specific grade levels, and then they can practice that throughout the week with their classes. It is built into the schedule at Oak Grove School. It's one block, about 30 minutes, K through 6, and pre-K runs theirs a little bit differently, but they have it built into their week as well. And then it is taught in a variety of ways at Oak Grove. So sometimes the classroom teachers teach it. Sometimes the school counselor takes it on and does that lesson in the classroom. And sometimes it's co-taught by both the teacher and the counselor. So we have a variety of ways, and Morgan can share a little bit about what that's like, and then Catherine can share as well.
Yeah, so as a new staff member to the district this year, teaching Second Step gave me the opportunity to not only learn a lot about the kids through the Second Step, but also to collaborate with the staff and with Catherine and determine, what is the major need in each of the classrooms. And that's kind of where we decided to start in each unit of Second Step. So that was really helpful to me when starting. As Mary said, it's helpful. It gives consistent and the same language to use from kindergarten all the way up through 6th grade. And it's really an interactive curriculum. It has things like brain builders that get the kids ready to learn. There's videos, there's pictures, there's times for them to reflect and share their own experiences throughout Second Step. And you can kind of be a little bit flexible with it as well and implement things that are happening within your school into it also. And then Paul, do you want to click on
So
that?
if you click on the Second Step logo, that's a link to a sample lesson. And then, if you would like me to come navigate, I can. Which grade were you doing?
First grade.
So you go to the first grade. Yep, and then go to lesson presentation. And so this is available to all teachers, very user-friendly. And then at the very bottom where the Zoom, the thing is on the other side, the right-hand side, yeah. There's a next button, and so.
So this was just one example of the emotion management unit for the first graders. This was one of the later lessons, and it was talking about feeling frustrated. Mostly throughout the lesson, this unit helps kids, look for cues in how others are feeling and also themselves. So, what facial expressions do they have? What is their body language? What is going on around them? It helps them kind of figure out how to best support themselves and self-regulate and help best support their classmates as well. And it starts with a brain builder that they really enjoy.
We don't have to watch it.
Yeah.
But so every second.
Yeah, you don't have
How are we gonna resolve that?
So every Second Step lesson starts with a brain builder to get the kids, and it's usually movement related. So the kids get up out of their seats and they follow along with the directions.
And the brain builders are appropriate for each age level. So I've had the fortune of working with kids, and Morgan will continue to do this, from K through 6th grade. So they are used to brain builders. By the time they get into 5th grade, they're ready for it to be a little different. And there's a really lovely progression of skill building over the years. So this is what our first graders, an example of what our first graders get.
And Catherine, the counselors really came to the school district unified with an ask for the school district to invest in the Second Step program. So there's lots of collaboration amongst the school counseling teams at all of our various
throughout
schools.
the district. We reviewed numerous research-based, data-driven kind of life skills, social emotional learning that had been reviewed and evaluated over the years. And so we selected some to observe, and then we really dug into Second Step. Oak Grove had already been using it. Many of the schools had used it in the kit format. We had started using it in the digital format. And so the unanimous was, yes, let's get this. Our teachers can use it, our school counselors can use it with ease, and kids really enjoy it.
Did you want to say anything?
Do you want to say anything else?
First group.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So the progression of the second step is you really, and you're going to see some kids talking about it. Hopefully the audio will work, Paul.
Yeah.
There are Oak Grove students, and they pretty much tell you, you'll get a representation of first graders talking about some of what they've learned this year from Morgan. Morgan's asking a group of fourth graders, you know, what they're learning this year, and you really hear a little bit, it's not long, about the process they go through over these years of self-regulation. How do they learn to identify their own feelings? What strategies do they use? You'll see one student really talking about mindfulness and butterfly hugs, and all the grades get age-appropriate, essentially developmental design lessons in bullying prevention. And so that's a standard unit that is a separate curriculum that Oak Grove also implements, that the kids, even though it's a little dated, the kids really love it and they get a lot out of it, and the uniformity of language is tremendously useful in restorative practices.
Why is it dated?
Oh, well, the bullying prevention unit per se has not been updated by the Committee of Children. What Morgan was just talking about was all updated in the last 2 years. So bullying prevention, the videos are a little dated, but if you say to the kids, it's a little retro, the outfits aren't quite what you might be wearing.
Okay, I got it.
You got it? Okay.
The messaging is spot
The
on.
message is the same,
That means
the
it's up to date
attire
for
might
me.
be a little different.
And along with this is there are other skills and strategies that are built in. For example, we've used zones of regulation
Yes.
as a tool that is that kids can use to help identify where they are feeling emotionally, and that has become pretty standard as well. Kids can say, "I'm in the blue today," and teachers do lots of checking in around that. So those, while it's not a part of Second Step, it is its own thing, but it is built into the work that the counselors have done. Will it work?
Hit the button. We'll
Yeah.
see. So,
You'll get a voice once they start.
My name's Penelope, and I'm in 4th grade.
My name's Ada, and I'm in 4th grade.
My name is Isabella, and I'm in 4th grade.
My name is Jeffrey, and I'm in 4th grade.
Penelope, what do you like about Second Step?
I like learning about the Logic and Emotion Center.
Ada, what have you learned so far in Second Step?
We've learned about how emotions work together and how a brain can be balanced on both emotion and logic center. And we learned about stuff like that.
Isabella, in Second Step, what have you learned over the years?
We learned about the triple R to help stop bullying. The triple R stands for recognize, refuse, and report.
Jeffrey, what have you learned to use from Second Step?
Using mindfulness, breathing, cat scratch, the butterfly hug, etc.
So what have you been learning in Second Step so far?
We've been learning about bullying and ways to stop it.
Yeah. But my favorite part is about, we learn, how to, stand up for people and stuff like that. And I remember, I think it was, 2 weeks ago that, we wrote, what's okay for, jokes and what's not okay. That was my favorite part.
We also, in the past, have been learning about ways to control our really strong emotions, and focus techniques to help us with pretty much everything.
We, in 5th grade, we learned about feelings, and we learned about mad, sad, happy, and excited. We have to be calm, safe, and respect when other people are talking. We learn about how to solve problems. Like if somebody's arguing, then we learn how to fix it without being in trouble or them not being friends with you anymore. We also learn about different situations for different people. Everybody has different feelings and how to learn body language. We learn from what you can tell from the outside, from getting people to explain what happened on the inside.
Second step.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep.
So Academies is a video as well because Kelly and her team couldn't be here tonight, but they did plan.
Fire away.
Yeah.
Great.
Good evening. This is Anna Ocasio. I'm school counselor at Academy School.
And I'm Kelly Dias, the principal at Academy School. We're excited to share our Constellations model with you.
So I'm a teacher leader this year, focusing on social emotional learning in our building. And I spent some time this summer aligning the CASEL standards with our school-wide standards and the second step standards, as well as the EL habits of character, which are from our EL curriculum for literacy, and use that to create a matrix for bi-monthly lessons that we would do as a school.
In addition to using second step in our school, we decided that we would create a model called Constellations to increase school-wide SEL instruction. Every staff member in the building is matched up with one classroom, and every other Tuesday during the time that we would be at All School Sing, we meet in our Constellations groups.
Each Constellations meeting time aligns with, like I said, one of the designated standards, and the lessons are all differentiated by grade level. Staff are sent the lessons a week prior, and all the materials are prepared in advance, like worksheets or videos.
The overarching goals of Constellations are to cross-pollinate members of our community in order to increase the amount of trusted adults that students have access to, therefore reducing our silos. Also to have common themes of SEL study at the same time school-wide in a time that was already blocked off in the calendar. It also increases preventative SEL education, reactive behavior approaches. Also aligning the components of second step, CASEL, EL, and our 5 universal school character traits, which Anna spent a lot of time on in the summer. To provide a ready-made lesson for homeroom teachers and a collaborative teaching approach so they're not asked to do extra work in trying to integrate another thing. And to eventually and possibly adopt an advisory model where students have the same group for an extended period of time and over an extended period of years while they're at Academy School.
Okay, so we're going to share an example of a lesson here. If I can find it. Nope, that's our group assignment. Okay, so this is an example of a lesson. This is our character trait for the month of December. It's responsibility. So you can see up at the top, it has all of the different standards, how they address this specific character trait. So the L habit is I take responsibility. The CASEL standard is responsible decision making. And in our school pledge, one of the things that we say is I will be responsible for my actions. So the theme of responsibility for this lesson focuses on accountability and self-management, doing the right thing even when our friends or our peers are doing something different, and taking responsibility when we make a mistake, even when it feels hard. Each constellation starts with a mindful moment. We've been using Mind Yeti from Second Step to scaffold those, but a lot of classrooms have mindfulness that's built into their classroom culture, so they don't have to use the suggested Mind Yeti. They can use another mindfulness activity that they already use in their classroom or that they've used previously. And then the lessons, like I said, are differentiated by grade level. Sometimes it'll be a K1 lesson and just a second grade lesson will be separate. But for this one, kindergarten has a story that they'll listen to. There's prompts for how to introduce the lesson to students, and then there's usually an activity associated. So each lesson takes about 20 minutes. And they will do a little bit different things, but all focusing on the same theme. So kindergarten's going to read David Gets in Trouble. It's just a book about a student who's struggling to make good choices. First and second grade will read a story about how to apologize, which is about taking responsibility for a mistake. Third and fourth grade is a similar theme, listening or reading But It's Not My Fault by Julia Cook. Again, talking about accountability. And for fifth and sixth grade, they have a Rocket Kids video about owning your actions, and they'll have scenarios that they'll look at and go through how they would take accountability if they were in that type of scenario. So they're all around the same theme, but just differentiated by age. And try to incorporate some of the skills from Second Step, which include like doing role playing and doing a lot of noticing people's body language and how other people are feeling. So most of these things have an empathy component as well. And it leads into our January theme, which is citizenship. So both of those themes, responsibility and citizenship, will talk about integrity, which is also an L habit that we are learning about.
Thanks for listening, and we will also link the lesson to the slide in case you wanted to check it out in further detail.
Green tree?
Okay. Jen Germain, third grade teacher, is on Zoom with us to help talk about morning meeting. We're also going to talk about PBIS in our school as well. And so, Jen, if you can hear me, if you want to get started with morning meeting.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Morning meeting has really been transformative, I feel like, in my classroom. We start every morning with morning meeting, and it is everyone in the class, and then also every 6 weeks it rotates. I started the beginning of the year with an academic support teacher, and then our librarian was part of our morning meeting for a while, and right now our art teacher is part of morning meeting. So we're all building community together, and we share the roles of leading morning meeting. And then if one of us isn't there, it still seems very much the same each day to all of the students. And at the beginning of the year, a lot of the morning meeting was spent getting to know each other. And then also developing our agreements to be safe, to be kind, and to be responsible. And so that's what we use the time for. And if you can click to the next slide, then I'll talk a little bit more about what morning meeting looks like. So these are our 4 components of the morning meeting. We always greet each other in the morning. And usually it's saying hello. Sometimes we do it in a funny way. And I usually pair the greeting with a share if you want to. So the students will say good morning to each other. They'll say good morning to the person to the left or to right of them, depending on which way the circle starts. And then, for example, if it's on Monday, we have My Weekend Monday. So if you want to share something about your weekend, you're more than welcome to. Although we do limit it to 2 sentences because sometimes they can get really long and they can get really in depth. And at first that was really, really hard for them, but they've gotten really good at it now and really take the time to think, okay, what am I going to share and put it into 2 sentences. So it's also helped them with their planning about talking about things too. I have noticed that. And then Wednesdays is kind of my favorite day. We do What Would You Do Wednesday? And so I will pose a question, for example, if you were out at recess and you saw that your friend was upset, what would you do? And I've found that at the start of this, there were just a few students who shared. And after a few rounds of doing this, almost everybody shares something about how they would react or what they would do. And we can kind of tailor it to what might be happening in the classroom, or it can be something more general. And then on Friday, it's always Funny Friday, where you can greet each other in a funny way or tell a joke or something like that. And that's how we always start our morning meeting. And you don't have to share, but you're welcome to share if you want to. Then I usually do the morning message and then the group activity at the end. So I do mine a little bit the opposite way that it's on the slide. So then I will go through our day. Usually I start by saying, okay, we had breakfast, we're in the middle of morning meeting, and then go through the rest of the day and give them a quick snippet throughout the day about what we're going to be doing in literacy and math and each of our different times. And then I'll ask if anybody has any questions, and then we will usually end with some sort of group activity or a game. A few of the favorites I've listed here, we have Frog Detective, where we have a detective that steps out into the hallway. We have a poison frog that will stick their tongue out, and the detective will come back in and try to guess who the poison frog is. We also play Four Corners, where we have one person in the middle with their eyes closed. And everybody goes to a different corner in the room and they'll guess the corner, and whatever corner the person in the middle guesses, they're out until we have one person. And then Rhythm Master is another one, which can also have a colleague who's very skilled at making the rhythm match what they're going to be doing next. So Rhythm Master is where this will be one student will step out into the hallway. There'll be someone that's designated the rhythm master, and they'll do a beat that everybody else follows along to. And the person that's out in the hallway will come in and have to guess. And the way that my colleague handles this is when it comes to almost the time of morning meeting being over, she can slow down the rhythm and sort of calm everybody and then lead into the rest of the day that way. I've also kind of used morning meeting to my afternoon. After recess can sometimes be challenging. A lot of things can happen out at recess, and a lot of people have a lot of things that they want to talk about. So we have 5 minutes of self-care when we come in. That gives me a chance to gauge what we might need to talk about. And then we have a quick afternoon meeting where I go over the end of the day schedule. So just the part that we haven't covered yet. And then if anything has happened out at recess, I can make a general statement about it, or we can talk generally about, being a good friend or being kind to other people. And I've seen that lessens the students' need to talk about it more. It's out there, we've talked about it, and they've been able to even work through it themselves after a quick discussion altogether. So it's been really impactful having morning meeting regularly every day.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Our next thing is PBIS, so that's Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, which is an evidence-based tiered framework for supporting students' behavioral, academic, social, emotional well-being. And when implemented with fidelity, it improves social, emotional competence, academic success, and school climate. And we're really focusing on this year in terms of really increasing our school climate in a way that brings more positivity with the panorama surveys over the last couple years, and kindness and safety really being concerning results from that one indicator. It's really been an emphasis for us, and so recently we've really amped this up. Jen is also a part of our PBIS committee to focus on those things. So in the picture over here, you'll see safe, responsible, and kind are our three kind of, it's our three kind of goals for what we want to focus on as a school. And so we have signs around in every classroom. We have them in the hallways, outside the bathrooms, in the gym, in all spaces of the school that kind of show what the expectations are and what it looks like to be safe, responsible, and kind in those areas. And at the beginning of the year, classroom teachers and staff go over what those look like. Some you'll see even practicing in the hallway, the desired expectation and what that should look like, how it impacts our community as a whole. And so each classroom will have 3 to 5 classroom expectations based on our school-wide expectations. They practice those pro-social behaviors in different settings within the school at the start of the year, after long breaks, because kids come back after a break and it's, we have to get them back to what does it look like to be at school. And so structures and routines are really what set students up for success within the classroom, especially around things like transition. So really practicing those, what it feels like, looks like, sounds like, so that they understand how to do school, for lack of a better term, is really a lot of work that we do in the beginning of the year. And so we are safe, we are kind, and we are responsible. We talk about with staff a lot about positive reinforcement and the 5-to-1 ratio of 5 positive comments to every one correction you're making for a behavior. It can be really challenging, and we have some staff that are amazing at it, and it really makes a difference just setting the tone in the classroom. And so we also have what we call a greenie system. And so the greenie pictured up there that says safe, kind, and responsible with a gecko on it, those can be given throughout the class period for kids that are demonstrating safe, kind, and responsible. And the practice is, if you're getting a greenie, you are sharing that greenie with a specific positive praise about whatever it is that they're doing. It's not just, hey, great job, you turned in your homework, or you've been, it's really specific to the behaviors we want to see. And so each classroom has a jar that they fill up called their greenie jar. If they fill that jar, they then get to go to the office, which you see pictured, some of the kids who bring down, it might be their job for the class to bring down their greenie jar. And Deb Schiller, who's our clerk in the office, has been amazing and taking all the pictures. They'll come down with their greenie jar, and then she'll put bugs for each kid that's in the classroom in that larger jar. We had to order more bugs because they're doing so well, we don't have enough. So once that jar is filled, then we do an all-school kind of celebration. So next week we're having a spirit week to celebrate, which will be fun. And so kids have really gotten into that. Recently, we've put in the front hallway, GSS is kind, safe, and responsible. Those pictures are then going up on the wall, and it's been great because even in the staff meeting today, people were talking about how the kids will walk by and look. And so we're gonna also start doing announcements at All School Sing about reminders about that, classrooms that Deb is taking notes about who's coming down with their jar. So we'll have kids announce like, congratulations to whichever class for filling your greenie jar and adding to the bugs. So we're really building up that kind of school-wide piece of it to kind of instill some more, just excitement around being safe, kind, and responsible. Because it's oftentimes easier to focus on like the unexpected behaviors that are happening, right, and the challenging behaviors, and I don't think we do enough of this. So there's a lot to PBIS beyond this, but this is what we're choosing to highlight right now to encourage safe, kind, and responsible. And if you want to know more, there's a link.
I've got a suggestion. Hang on, John, just a second. Sure. If I go in that room with this, it won't be there, but you won't hear it twice.
Paul, I was actually going to suggest that rather than the video, just for the sake of time and sound quality, I'm happy to just talk a couple talking
That's
points.
great.
It's okay.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. John Sessions, principal of Putney Central School. I'm going to speak on behalf of who you see pictured there, which is Marissa Lazarus, our school counselor on the left, and Bethany Connolly, who's our behavior interventionist on the right there. And, you know, we just want to echo a lot of the great work that's happening in other schools. A lot of what we've heard about is also true at Putney Central, and is really sort of a district-wide approach. You know, and to echo a few things, Julianne mentioned how interconnected sort of social emotional teaching and academic learning is. And we, you know, very much have the same sentiment. And similar to Green Street, we approach it from a tiered lens, just as we would academic development. So we use language of like tier 1 instruction from a social, emotional, and behavioral standpoint, in tier 2 and tier 3. And I'll just give a couple examples of what that looks like, and pass on to the next group. So Bethany and Marissa are co-teach core social emotional learning classes all the time. So they're in every elementary classroom twice a week, running, you know, generally 30 or 45-minute classes, co-taught by school counselor and a behavior interventionist, which is a pretty powerful combination from our standpoint. And they talk about things like they teach second step lessons, and they talk about what's happening in students' brains and strategies for regulation and sort of the neuroscience of emotional well-being for older students. And for younger students, it's around what we call zones of regulation and different strategies like that that are more applicable to younger students. And so that's learning that everybody in the school gets on a really regular basis, which has been new this year, which has been really powerful at our school. Then some students receive what we would call tier 2 behavioral or social emotional learning, and that's students that need a little extra practice or more targeted support in certain areas. And so throughout the week, we have students doing things like in a small group with Marissa, you know, maybe talking about how to be a positive leader in their classroom, or in a small group with Bethany, working around how to handle frustrating events that happen in a positive and productive way, and sort of really looking at what are the needs of our students and what are they showing us their needs are, and then how do we work with them in a positive and productive way from a place of teaching and helping them practice skills. And then just like in academics, there are some students who need more individualized work. And so throughout the week, those students have really regular access to both Marissa and Bethany, as well as Susan Gunther Moore, who's our school social worker, to really sort of reinforce these concepts of social and emotional well-being throughout their time. So that was their video in a nutshell. They linked some resources there to review. So please do check it out. If you have time to watch their video, I think it really validates the really great work that they do. And so I don't want to shortchange that, but for the sake of time, that's a quick summary. So thanks.
And then lastly, we have Michaela with some students to talk about the winter.
Good evening. We'll try to be really quick. Aware the student group, it was multicultural awareness, even though it's not an acronym, I write it in bold letters. It was originally multicultural awareness, and it was started in 1998 by Bob Peoples, who was at the time the counselor at the middle school and high school, and has lived on since then. So now there are two, instead of being one group, it's two groups. There's a BAMS group and a high school group. And it's been so important to kids over the years that we've decided to make those groups district-wide. So there are a lot of schools that have their own play groups for students of color. play groups, sometimes they're lunch groups. In addition to that, there are LGBTQIA plus groups at the elementary school, which are also lunch groups, and I think sometimes they're breakfast groups, and sometimes they're at one point Guilford had a late girl group of kids that were able to meet, and Catherine Mason's groups have the cutest name, which is a chocolate altogether group that the kids named themselves. And so I just have a couple students here to just talk about what AWARE has meant to them, and then we're out of your hair. But I just think that these are not, even though they're thought of as co-curricular, as not academic, that these groups are very essential to our students' success. To walk into a room and not be the only one, you don't even know that you need that until you experience it for the first time. And so many of our students, these are the only places where they experience that and have that chance to connect. And they could be talking about anything. The idea that we're always talking about race is not true. Sometimes they're playing Lego, sometimes they're talking about what they want to eat, and sometimes they are talking about deep issues and how they affect them. It just all depends. But just the necessity, I can't say enough about the development that students need that's necessary for them to be who they are. And I'll let y'all talk about yourself and stop talking for you.
Hi, I'm Sadie.
Oh, I'm Zaria.
And we're both seniors at BUHS. I joined AWARE halfway through last school year because that's when I transferred in. And you've been here since.
Yeah, I've been here since I was in 7th grade, so I've been in AWARE for 6 years. I thought you wanted to talk first.
When looking at BUHS on the website, I saw that there was AWARE specifically for BIPOC students, and I visited AWARE while shadowing and then joined once I started here, and it's just been amazing to have so many opportunities to connect with other students of color, and we've done field trips and conferences and presentations, both listening and presenting, and it's been a great chance to really work on public speaking skills as well as learning about issues that are going on in Vermont. And it's just been a great community experience to really get to know each other.
Yes. Okay, you did pretty good.
She did great.
Yeah, pretty good. So for my experience with AWARE, I agree with the whole public speaking thing because otherwise I would not be able to do this. I built up my skill over the years, so I'm still not really good at public speeches, but public speaking. I've got to connect with community as well. Like this is our 2nd year going to Susu Farm, which is a BIPOC run farm, and it's a fun experience to sit there and connect back with the earth and back with our state. Okay. Something I really enjoyed is the field trips we go on because they're always meaningful and they're not just like random field trips. Like we went to DC and we went to visit Howard, which is an HBCU. And it was really fun to experience that as a group and rather by yourself because you have someone to relate it back to. And then we also got to see the African American Museum, which that was really emotional for all of us, but we had each other to experience that with. What else? AWARE is like my safe space at school, and I get really upset sometimes when we don't have it because it's like, oh, not this week, next week. But it's just a time to relax and really just one time just like be with my Black community and just like BIPOC community rather than just like my school community. And it's like, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know. That's pretty good. But anyways, I got to connect with other students that I don't think otherwise I would talk to. Like we have our Springfield group AWARE, and that was fun because we got to connect and be like, this is our experiences at our school, and those were their experiences. And then we had a joint presentation, which was really enjoyable at where? What was it?
The Rolling Conference in
Yeah.
Burlington.
That was enjoyable, and yeah, and Michaela's like my other mom now. It's been a long time. She always makes it easy to be around and easy to speak and really speak her mind because you don't always have to present to be aware, and I think that's like a misconception. But you can just give your input, or you can just enjoy the space, which I really like because it's pretty good.
That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sadie and Daria.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for being patient. Thank you.
So it's a wide range of experiences. Clearly, we can dig deeper at future meetings. But going back to the second slide with some of the questions, after our last MLSS meeting, I got some feedback through email, which is great. Encourage the same type of thing for this.
I plan to have a sort of maybe a response to that at the next meeting, and so maybe we can have, if there are questions on this, we can kind of include that.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Just before we move on from admin reports, can I just ask a question about the monthly report that we received from the various schools?
Sure.
The one specifically from Academy School, and oh golly, I think it's on page 12. It was a weird, it was just it said 59 injuries and 137 illnesses. That seemed like a lot. And I'm just wondering about those totals.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have
Okay.
an answer or response
Okay.
really. I would have to check in with Nurse Amy and Kelly.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay. And I can actually give you this page that I printed out, just so that you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that board report that went out? Seeing none?
We're just hoping that we hear from all the leadership councils to use those 3 questions that are in the board report. A lot of them were blank this time. And we go right, I know I go right to them, say what are the leadership councils want to ask the board. So make use of those if you can, please.
Is it possible that's because the teams haven't met, like ours is blank because we didn't have a meeting in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So like because those meet once a month and there's board meetings every other week?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, ours was blank
maybe
for that
a
reason.
holiday or something.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank you for that question and Hannah for that response. I think we're going to, okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we are going to, Emily is going to wow us. So 7:08, we are taking a 5-minute break. You're back from the break, and now we're on to the next item on the agenda, education tax rate, budget impacts, and legislative action.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the chocolate mat. That's really nice. So I'm Emily Kornheiser. I'm one of 3 state representatives for Brattleboro. I'm the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And so I am one of the people that spends the most time talking and thinking about property tax rates and school tax and education spending. Most of those conversations in the legislature don't happen in the education committees. They actually happen in the tax committees, with some consultation with the education committees. And so in light of a fairly drastic letter from the tax commissioner about expected tax rates, and then some fairly intense press coverage about it statewide, I thought it would be helpful for me to come here and do some, I'm gonna call it like level setting of what the process looks like and what your role is and what my role is and what voters' roles are, and try to figure some stuff out together. So just to like set the stage that I know that you're all already on, the pandemic was really hard in a lot of ways, and one of the things that was not hard was the fact that we saw this unbelievable surge in federal spending that improved a lot of our wallets and bank accounts, improved the opportunity for schools to spend with sort of direct money from ESSER, and then whatever the thing was before ESSER that was like ESSER. And all of that extra spending, either like out of our own bank accounts because we got checks in the mail, or because districts were spending more and hiring more with the federal money, all led to having a lot more state revenues in terms of taxes collected on things like meals and rooms tax and sales tax. And the reason I'm telling you about that today is sort of the two pieces of that federal spending, that extra taxes collected in terms of meals and rooms and sales, and the extra ESSER money, caused us to basically be able to hold tax rates steadier in the face of a lot of increased spending from districts over the last few years. Because I'll get into that a little bit more actually as we go, about sort of how property taxes and sales taxes relate to each other. I promise it will be almost interesting by the time I'm done. Or I don't promise that. I'm going to try to make it almost interesting. It's the time to come. I was at an event on Saturday and joked that I can now like turn almost any conversation into an interesting conversation about taxes, but I don't think anyone else laughed when I said it. There, thank you. So every year, the Commissioner of Taxes is required by statute to send out that letter on December 1st. It came out a day early this year, but it is a statutory requirement. It's not a political act or a posturing act. And the numbers that are in the December 1st letter are actually a joint forecast between the Legislative Joint Fiscal Office, mostly someone named Julia Richter, who's lovely, hope you someday get to meet her, and very good at her job, and then a whole crew at the Department of Taxes. And it's supposed to forecast the education tax rates for the year so that you all can know all of the different pieces that might lead you to be thinking as you budget. And the calculations are all really fiercely, strictly defined. Oh, I don't want to watch myself. The calculations and what goes into them are very strictly controlled by law. And the Agency of Education participates, and the Department of Finance and Management participates, but mostly it's between the Tax Department and the Joint Fiscal Office. And it is only a starting point. Because lots of math, but essentially the math is made out of preliminary budget information that is collected by the Agency of Education. This is a fairly informal process because, as you all might or might not know, the Agency of Education has never succeeded in having a common piece of software between school districts and the Agency of Education. And so that means that when they ask districts about their budgeting, it's really like whoever responds to someone's email is the data that they get, okay? So it's like a best case scenario, but it is far from perfect. It's also the budgets that are being sent to the Agency of Education are before all of you on school boards have had a chance to like have really deep discussions and muck about and talk to, you know, all the folks that you talk about when you set a budget. So it's the sum of all of those collected budgets, which is minus all of the money that you might have in reserves, right? That sets your education spending. Over the last many years, most school districts have been able to keep their spending on education fairly high because students had huge needs, teachers had huge needs, districts had huge needs. But the education spending, which is not the same as the spending on education, is everyone still following me? It's not fun? Okay. Has been able to stay fairly low because of all that federal spending, because people were able to build up reserves for that federal spending. So, collecting the sum of all that education spending. Does everyone already know this, or is this actually helpful? Okay, so Department of Taxes collects the sum of all the education spending. That's the spending on education minus grants, reserves, whether those are federal or state grants. Collects all of that, says, okay, this is how much districts are going to need to meet their budget needs from the state. How much money do we already have to meet those budget needs? And the how much money we already have is what's already in the education fund. And that is other revenues that come into the education fund. That's meals and rooms tax, that's sales tax, that is a portion of purchase and use tax, which is the tax you pay when you buy your car, and a few other sources that I'm not going to get into. Part of cannabis taxes, but that goes to after school, et cetera, et cetera. All of that was up fairly high the last few years because of all that extra spending we were all doing. That's all really sort of chilling out now. It's still higher than before the pandemic, but it's calming down. So what's the difference between the amount of money we have in the fund or expected to have in the fund from those other sources and the amount of money that's needed by districts? That is the money that we charge in property taxes every year, that we levy in property taxes. And that is homestead taxes and non-homestead taxes. Homestead taxes are the taxes that are levied on folks who own a home. Sometimes it's based on the value of your home, and sometimes, if your income is low enough, it's based on your income. I pay based on my income. And then there's the non-homestead tax, which is not just second homeowners, despite many rumors to the contrary. The non-homestead tax is second and third and fourth homeowners. It's also all commercial properties, all rental properties. It's just everything that's not a homestead. And so those, we set the rates for those through like fairly simple math to just match the amount of money that's needed in the education fund. There's a hole in the education fund, property taxes fill it. And that's how we do it every year. It's really different than any other budgeting that we really ever do anywhere. You don't say like, here's how much money we have, this is how much money we have to spend. We actually say, how much money do schools need, do students need, do teachers need, staff need, and we raise that much money every year. It's kind of like an amazing reversal, and it means that most of the time we can meet people's needs, except for there's the control in place of the fact that it's related to property taxes. And so every voter in the state gets to say yes or no to our local budgets as a way of saying, this is a property tax level that I'm comfortable with or not comfortable with. So that's how the December 1st letter is set. And it sets an average around the state. None of us pay any average, none of us are average. We are all special in one direction or another, right? We all know that, especially in a school. So none of us are actually gonna pay that average. But that doesn't mean that we're all gonna pay below the average just because we're feeling good that day. Some of us are gonna pay over the average, right? So, how do we get from this like magical projection of the December 1st letter into actual tax rates that district voters are gonna pay? Basically, we have the same conversation starting in the first week of the legislative session in first week in January. We have essentially the exact same conversation every single week until April, which is how much information do we actually have now? How many budgets have been warned? And so we go from, okay, 1 budget's been warned, okay, 5 budgets have been warned, okay, Burlington's budget has finally been warned, so we like have, you know, the smaller and larger places get warned, then we get closer and closer to actually knowing what the sum total of warned budgets will be, and we get closer and closer to setting the tax rates. And in the meantime, we talk about where is the spending coming from. I want to really talk to you all about that and hear from you about that as we go. But we get closer and closer to sort of closing that gap and setting a real rate. But we set the rate really just based on like, what are the budgets warned at and how much money is needed to close that gap. In the last few years, as I said, we've been able to sort of keep the rates low because we had that extra money in the fund. We don't have that extra money in the fund anymore, just because that extra sort of like COVID era money is gone. And so again, it's not unreasonable that we would see these really high property tax projections because we're seeing really high education spending right now because we still have really high needs and we don't have that extra money in there to cover the difference, either at the district level or at the state education fund level. So if all of the assumptions come to pass, right, every district winds up warning budgets that are around what were estimated last month, and we don't see magical extra money going into the education fund, the property tax rate increases are gonna look around sort of the 15% increases that we talked about, that were in the letter. That really doesn't work for most of us, right? I know that doesn't really work for me. I know that doesn't work for most voters, and I know that, and so the option that the legislature then has is to find other revenue. And so that means things like there are some exemptions to sales tax, removing those exemptions. For instance, we have an exemption to the sales tax for things that are purchased in the cloud. We could remove that exemption, that would raise $20 million. That's not actually gonna bring the percentage down that much because we're talking about like hundreds of millions of dollars that are needed. We can expand to tax services and not just sales. Lots of states do that. So like if you got your hair cut or you went to an attorney, you might pay sales tax on that. And there's sort of other things like that. There are ways, and so those are sort of on the table, and that's what we would talk about between January and May. But it's not like magical money that falls from the sky. It just means that we're gonna be taxing people in some other way. Another option is that we, and these can all happen at once. It's not just like one lever gets pulled. We can do lots of things. Another option is that as we pass those tax rates sufficient to meet the education needs, we hold some people more harmless, that some taxpayers more harmless than others. So we could raise the non-homestead tax rate a little higher in order to keep the people who pay on income on the property tax side, who are sort of likely the lower income folks, a little more harmless. Or any combination of that. But again, that's still like someone's paying the bill. And the way our property tax system is set up right now, it's not really quite nuanced enough to really have like those with the greatest wealth pay the most and those with the least pay the least. It's not, doesn't have quite that level of granularity that say income taxes do. And so that's sort of like what's on the table that we're gonna need to figure out this year. The piece that makes it all that much more complicated in all of this, and makes it even harder to estimate anything, because that, what I just described to you is just like a normal year in some ways, like that's the process in a normal year. What makes things more complicated is that two years ago, last biennium, we passed a bill to change the way we count students. We call that pupil weighting, WEIGHT, not like people aren't sitting around waiting, it's like scale weighting. And we changed the way we count students. We did that after a decade of both pressure and like a lot of academic research, the way we were counting students before. And I think I came and talked to the school board about this 2 years ago. Okay. Had really like no evidence base to it and was not related to the cost of educating low SES students or rural students or students who are English language learners. And we passed those changes after the School Board Association and the Superintendent's Association and the NEA and like pretty much any collection of school-oriented folks saying, yes, this is the right thing to do. This school board very much advocated for this to happen. Every school board around the state did, including school boards, like really high wealth community school boards, said this is the right thing to do. Knowing that when we changed the way we were counting students, some districts were gonna gain a lot of tax capacity and some districts were likely gonna have a reduction in their tax capacity. At the time we passed the bill, the way all of the calculations looked, Windham Southeast was actually gonna have a reduction in their tax capacity. That means for the same amount of spending, tax rates would go up. But we did it again anyway because it meant that students' needs would be better met by the calculation, and everyone thought it would create a more equitable school system, property tax system overall. I think it was the right thing to do. It's just back then it was hypothetical and the right thing to do, and now it's like the rubber's hitting the road and we're actually seeing what the impacts looks like from district to district, and it's likely going to get a little messy. And so that's the other sort of piece of this puzzle that we're all working through. We likely can't change any of that in the first year of implementation, because when things are messy and then you change them more, they usually just get messier, they don't get better. That's sort of like a very shorthand way of saying that. We're really going to need to see what implementation looks like before we can make any corrections. But I just sort of want to name that that's part of the messiness. And so the way we're counting students has really changed considerably. Before, and I was talking to our fiscal analyst about this today, and she backed me up. When we went into the process, I assumed that certain school districts in the state were going to be better off. I assumed that Windham Southeast was going to be better off. We have a decent number of English language learners compared to other regions. We have a lot of low-income students compared to other regions. I know how much folks in this community struggle. That assumption was wrong, because it's like there's just so much math all going at once. And so you don't know, like your instincts around it are often incorrect. And that was sort of an interesting part of it, because there's like what feels right and what you think is going on in your community, but when you compare it to all of the other communities in the state, that's not always true. And that's exactly the same dynamic that happens when we set property tax rates based on our spending. Because the decisions here are just one piece of the puzzle of all of the other budgets that are being voted across the state. And then we're gonna raise taxes here in order to supply all of the budgets that are needed all across the state. So the decisions we make here affects every property taxpayer in the state, and every property taxpayer in the state's decision is going to affect what we're able to do here. And so the options that I have going forward for myself are different from the options you have for yourself. You know, you have budget decisions to make. I have decisions to make about finding other revenue. And then we're also going to probably have a pretty deep conversation this year about what is driving this high spending, this increase in spending. I'm going into that with assumptions around the fact that like the kids are still not all right, and they still have really high, you know, we just had that great presentation, right? They still have really high social emotional needs. There's still a lot of learning loss that needs to be caught up. Teachers still haven't really had a break. Staff still haven't really had a break since the pandemic. Like, things are hard. The extra money is gone. Also, health insurance costs are going up faster than inflation. And special education costs, not just special education costs, like outstanding special education costs, which is a different category than regular special education, is also going up at a really, really high rate, and so we're trying to figure that out. And so I'm going to try to really understand what are the drivers of that growth and see if there's other ways we can cover them. So one example is we spend a lot of money in mental health in another way. Why are we spending that money in the schools? Maybe someone, like another fund should actually be covering mental health support in the schools. That's just like an example of what I'll be wrestling with. So, I'm now done talking at you. I would love to both answer questions and like any ideas that you all have around what you think are drivers of some of that spending, and ideas you have for what we can do about it.
I think what you just shared about the mental health costs and looking at other ways to support that is a really good approach. Because we certainly have taken on more and more responsibility through our school budgets in identifying resources for all of our children, and it's been exacerbated with the COVID and with the effect of the COVID. So I love that direction, Emily. I think that's a really good idea, and I think it would be beneficial to take some of the heat and expectation off of our budgets. but also continue to collaborate and work.
Yes.
That's the important balance.
Yeah, because you all know best what helps serve the kids in the schools.
Right.
And so you don't want someone else come in with their framework.
Yeah.
Does Windham Southeast pull down all the federal money possible? I know there are districts that definitely don't, and it's because they don't have the capacity to be like managing all of that federal money. And so that's a driver of cost in some other areas.
Yeah, I would say we are very assertive in that, and generally, we're often asked to be the pilot agency for the state of Vermont in many different divisions, human services, AOE, because our illustrious Paul Smith is demonstrated if you really lay out a clear strategy, what are you trying to accomplish, how are you going to accomplish it, and how much money will it cost, and then should we do it or not. That's the fundamentals of any federal grant, and Paul's just been terrific in facilitating that, and so I'm sure we are maximizing what's available in what's, I would say, routinely available to public schools, Title I, Title II, Title IV. And then there's a lot of grants that our central office team, are very assertive. I mean, Bryn here, she got $150,000 after school grant.
Rebecca Olmstead through the Nurse Leader program.
That's right. In the facility management, we have received millions of dollars over the last several years in both state and federal money, and I think there will be a lot more of that around the corner. So, we could always do more, but given our focus is not how do we create a revenue stream, it's how do we educate kids. We want to balance.
And so I think a lot of districts are not able to balance that as fully as Windham Southeast does, and so we'll be looking for how can the Agency of Education really be supporting that work. So as folks that are doing that well, think about what might make your jobs easier if the Agency of Education was doing it, versus sometimes when we add an extra layer, it just makes your lives harder. And so that's would be sort of helpful to talk about in the future.
I think it's a huge opportunity that there are many levels that we've seen over the last 10 years that AOE leadership and support that have, much like mental health and so many other things, shifted to the public schools where, Rebecca Holcomb would lead with, let's talk about how kids are learning over time and what are those investments. Here are the model schools, you remember models of success. There's so many research-based resources that we could have, and we wouldn't have to create them ourselves, and that's just a tremendous leveraging, opportunity that's not readily available today. The other area that we talked about with Michael Pishak, our state treasurer that visited, is how glaring an absence is in the climate change goals that the state legislature and public service department are obligated to begin writing rules and implementing, versus the design and the kind of research-based path ahead for public schools. We're all talking about recognizing that the state pulled out of capital construction aid in 2007, and we've been doing a good job with that. But when it's time to go out and refit the HVAC systems, it's almost like, well, you better have an engineer somewhere in your neighborhood, because there is no guiding, light out there from Agency of Ed, General Services. So it's kind of like a random walk. And we don't want to invest in those unit ventilators, but that is the default. 1956 technology is the default. I hate to see us do that for the next 20 years.
And the deferred maintenance costs, especially in the light of the PCB conversations, are huge. Some districts are able to bond in really significant ways because of the cultural and economic makeup of those communities. And then we all carry those costs, not just those districts. And so without it being a state level construction aid formula, we're all carrying the responsibility of it, but only some of us get to carry the benefit. And so I'm really hopeful that the task force that Mike came to talk to you about today is going to make some real progress. Other drivers of costs that would be helpful for me to be taking back, or questions about all of the stuff I said?
Let me make a comment when it comes to ESSER and the approach that we took with the ESSER funding. I got some feedback yesterday from a teacher leader in our teachers union who attended a state level meeting through the Vermont NEA, and essentially they were reflecting on the process for identifying ESSER funds over the last three and a half years. And the facilitator went out of their way to recognize Windham Southeast as kind of the gold standard in terms of how we approached balancing our ESSER funds through building projects and also identifying resources in our schools for our children. So I thought it was awful nice for that to be shared, and thought it would be nice to share publicly.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
I had not heard that, and that is great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ruby?
I have to admit my brain is breaking just a little bit about this whole thing, so just forgive me if I hopefully I'm not repeating something, but I just would like a little bit of clarity. I mean, the letter is so alarming.
Yeah.
So alarming. And so when I think about when that filters down, when that information filters down to our constituents, I want to understand a piece that we've kind of been touching on a little bit, which is around so that idea of we all individual school districts have expenses that ultimately go up to a big pot and we're all responsible for. And what I hear, or what I understand or believe, is that say, for example, our district is doing a great job at getting drawing down federal, funds and being fiscally responsible. And if there is another district that doesn't have the capacity, and so therefore is not, and then that goes into the pot, I feel like I'm not understanding what incentivizing there is to do a good job at resourcing properly so that you can not screw the pooch for the entire state.
Yeah.
And so when I like barely understand that, like I'm really, and it's not, I haven't been asleep at the wheel. It's just hugely enormous, and my brain is like this big. I can't get it off.
I mean, it's wildly confusing. Two, this is a ridiculous conversation to have at 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
And also, like, I like to do a lot of like fractions on the whiteboard when I'm thinking about this stuff, not use words. But essentially, I mean, in an ideal world, the Agency of Education would be doing a lot of work to sort of fix some of that capacity inequities so that everyone is essentially like budgeting and spending as effectively as possible. And that was a lot of the promise of Act 46 when it was imagined, that it would really bring administrative capacity to, and like feelings about Act 46 or Act 46 implementation aside, that was the idea, is that districts would then have every district would have greater administrative capacity to be doing that kind of stuff, and that would save us all. But math-wise, in terms of the tax rates, which is I think the bulk of your question, our local tax rates are a combination of sort of the general homestead rate that's set by doing the math for a big pot. But then there's the local factors, which is the number of weighted students we have and the amount our actual education spending is. So we have the control over what our actual local education spending is, and that's what our local tax rates will be set by. It's sort of the multipliers of what the statewide tax rate is matched up to our local tax rate. And so that's sort of the control we have in terms of what tax rates will look like here. And that's sort of the tax rate for the district. It then also gets sort of shuffled out to the towns based on common levels of appraisal and all other kinds of stuff that I'm not gonna talk about because that would be too much of it. But I can talk about it some other time if you want.
And can I have just one other question related to the letter? Something I didn't quite understand, so maybe you can help me. There is kind of, I think it's on the last page, there's an underlined portion that has to do with income sensitivity. So this idea that what I read was, hey, all of you people who are used to having income sensitivity and having that have a positive impact on how much you have to pay, expect that not to happen this year. That's what I read.
Oh.
Or expect that, regardless of income, you will feel a hit. And it was underlined and bolded. And so I kind of want to get clear on that for when it does hit the press, because if that's not the correct understanding, great, wonderful. But if that is the correct understanding, I want to be able to speak to, someone in my town or in any of the our area towns when they ask about it.
So there's a few,
I have the line here if it helps.
Oh yeah, that'd be super helpful.
So it says, because of this lag in property taxes, all Vermont property taxpayers would experience the increased forecast in this letter in FY25 should it come to pass regardless of income.
Okay. So there's two different things happening there. One, the way that they're statutorily required to model this is to have the homestead, the non-homestead, and the income yields all modeled the same way. When we actually pass the yield bill, we're allowed to move those three things around, and I think I mentioned that earlier. So they have to show us the numbers that the income yield moves the same way, but we don't have to pass it in statute that same way. So we can sort of shield folks who pay on income some. But the income, the way that we pay based on our income is sort of like a rebate kind of thing. And that's what it looks like right on your tax letter. It looks like the state's sort of paying you to pay your taxes. I think it probably could all be framed a little bit better than it is, but that's how it looks now. And that's on a bit of a delay. And so for a few different reasons that I'm not gonna get into. So those are those two things. So yes, and so basically when our tax rates go up, folks who are paying on income, that goes up too. It just might not go up as much as it would if that same person was paying based on property. But when tax rates go up, they go up for everyone. Except for folks below $45,000 a year have what's called the circuit breaker, and they're that's like totally a whole different category that is entirely held harmless, both on municipal taxes and on education taxes.
I just want to say one thing about what you were asking before, Ruby, about what is the incentive for districts to search for more revenue when the money's just going to be spread across the whole state. I think that is the purpose of the per pupil spending cap, because they still have to come in under that amount or they're going to incur more tax penalties for their community.
We do not have a per pupil spending cap anymore.
Oh.
Right. This is part of that. Like, I've been kind of paying attention and not understanding what, like, it feels a little bit like, are we entering the Wild West? Like, what's going on?
So so it was broadly understood that the way the per pupil spending cap worked was not actually it didn't work anymore, and pretty much like most people, even like who had districts that never hit the cap, didn't think it worked the way it was supposed to anymore. But the bigger thing is that when we changed the weighting formula, districts would hit the cap who had never, without any changes in their spending, who had never hit the cap before. And it would have necessitated a level of budget cuts that was absolutely unfair, given that we wanted to allow people a soft transition to a very different tax rate. So that's why we removed it. There's a really comprehensive legislative study that was done last summer that I can share about ways to sort of like buffer or reduce education spending across the board. And we're going to talk through a bunch of those strategies once we get into the session.
Jody, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. I would like to support Mark and Frank in some of the comments that they made because I have the same comments. I've been involved in education for over 50 years, and I have watched how things have changed all over. And one of the things that really upsets me is the fact that the education fund has been seen kind of like a big fund up there. Let's let everybody put their fingers in it. And that's been using human services, mental health, food and snacks, items that teachers have to buy for the kids, social work, be a family to students, after school programs, plus the Ed Fund also supports or has supported in the past, and I don't know whether they support this year, but they support other things like education in prisons, adult education, and it just has grown that there are too many fingers in the pie, and it's not just our pre-K through 12 education. And we really need to educate these kids. They are the hope of the world nowadays. And to keep playing different tic-tac-toe games and adding to the education fund, Emily, is really, and it's not your fault. It's been going on for years. Really, really upsets me because the kids are getting shortchanged. And this district has worked very hard, even before Act 46. All of the schools in this district work very hard to have the best education for our kids. And it's not happening. So I do hope that you will look at other ways to pay for some of these services that have been put into the Ed Fund. That is very, very important. Find another way to pay them. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. I don't know if I would have brought up Act 46 if I knew you were there.
Yes, I have.
And I really appreciate your point. So we don't actually pay for corrections education through the education fund anymore. But what I think has happened is as spending in other areas of state government has reduced over the last 50 years at the federal level, at the state level, as our mental health system has struggled, or as child poverty has gone up, the school systems have picked up the slack through their individual budgets. So the education fund has maintained, I think, has really fairly well maintained its sort of integrity as being a fund that's only for school districts, but school districts are spending on things because no one else is willing to. And kids need to eat to learn, and so they get fed at school now. And it's really hard. And we need to figure out a way to make sure other systems collaborate better, looking at you, Matt, with themselves, like with the school. And I know that when those systems don't work well, the school needs to, and sometimes says like, I give up on making this collaboration work, we're just gonna do it ourselves. And I think we all do that in our own lives. Like I give up on trying to ask for help, I'm just gonna do it myself. And I think we've seen more and more districts do that. So appreciate your point, Jody.
Eva?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my question in regards to climate change is, last year we had epic floods, and the demand for our schools to support the community has increased. And I anticipate that, this isn't going to go anywhere. So I anticipate that there's going to be more of a demand for schools to be that support system, shelter, to be the hub to get food, to get information about services. That puts demand on our superintendent and the administration. And I know that there was environmental disaster funding, but I'm wondering if there are conversations that are happening where they're including schools in that resiliency plan. and funding moving forward?
Yes, we are actually one of sort of the top 3 legislative priorities this year. We should never add numbers like that. One of the top priorities this year is to really like build out our, where is the camera? Great. And she sees that. Great. One of the top priorities is to really build out both emergency infrastructure and flood resilience. And schools are often included in that planning at the local level. And the Agency of Education, I think, is part of sort of statewide emergency planning. But those systems have not been updated in a very long time, and we've learned a lot through the catastrophes that have come closer and closer together. And so we are putting a lot of work into both like the infrastructure planning and the planning this year.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the 4 towns in this district don't actually raise the total amount of money that's needed for education. So all towns receive from the state government, money to help them bridge the gap. So I was wondering if that is changing with all these other towns that are changing. And, sort of tied into reappraisal, higher reappraisal in some towns, and the same tax rates, and those towns are going to be paying a lot more education tax because they have higher appraisal value.
So for the first question, I don't think of it as the state sort of making up the difference. I think of it as all towns paying into the education fund and all towns and all districts getting the money that they need back. I know that on like a basic bookkeeping level, that means that sometimes money moves in one direction or another. But essentially when towns collect, it's gonna be so dorky, I'm sorry. When towns collect that money from folks for education property taxes, it's technically a trust tax, meaning it's not actually the property of that town when it's collected. It's the property of the education fund, and the town is just sort of holding it in trust before it's, sent back or used. On the second question, reappraisals make a big difference in municipal taxes, but if the point of the common level of appraisal is essentially to function as a statistical reappraisal tool in order to make up for the difference between the fact that we don't reappraise in Vermont at anything resembling a normal or reasonable rate. Most states reappraise every property like between every 3 and 5 years, and Vermont sometimes we wait like 30 years to reappraise. And so the common level of appraisal is essentially supposed to sort of like statistically compensate for the fact that we don't reappraise. And so your education property taxes shouldn't actually change that much between the common level of appraisal adjustment and a full reappraisal. But your municipal taxes don't have a common level of appraisal applied, and that can be quite a hit when reappraisals happen.
Coming from other funding mechanisms, and I want to be really clear, I'm not in support of this style of funding mechanism, but I'm curious if you have any insight coming from the mental health world. There was a shift in the DMH funding toward more utilizing key performance indicators and a results-based accountability format. Is there any discussion that you're aware of from either AOE or the legislation that might mirror that process? I'm thinking around educational benchmarks and impact that it might have on funding.
So in my professional life, I'm a results-based accountability trainer and facilitator and strategic planner, and I think it's really, really helpful for some particular areas of the world. I don't think there are any conversations whatsoever about moving school systems to performance-based budgeting at all. I've never heard of, even a sparkle or a flash of them. There's too much out of the control of the education system for that to be a fair equation. I think the kind of accountability practices that results-based accountability can bring to light in terms of making a clear connection between like activities and goals could be useful, but tying budgeting to that would be totally unfair and unreasonable, given that most educational outcomes are more closely related to social, socioeconomic status and stuff like that than to anything that happens in the classroom or within the school. For good or for worse.
Any other questions by the board, administration, members of the public?
One thing, Emily, Act 11, 2018, I think it was, that brought in the Health Commission, and we've seen health insurance, that's.
Oh, the statewide negotiated health insurance contracts, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know bill numbers or action numbers.
Yeah, so board knows that legislation pulled negotiations for the health insurance off the school district, off the board's venue and onto this health commission. We've seen phenomenal increases, everyone has, but we've gone from maybe $4 million total health insurance premiums here at the Windham Southeast School District in 21, 22, 5 million in 2023, so just 2 years ago. This projected budget is 7 million. And I guess the point is, I'm not so sure that was a great strategy, and maybe the legislature might want to revisit that, because the level of cost and benefit accelerated a lot after the negotiations went to another body.
So that was before my time in the legislature. I joined in 2019. But my understanding is that health insurance costs across the board have grown at that exponential rate since then. And so I want to be careful about correlation and causation. There are a lot of conversations right now about how to lower health insurance costs, and specifically for public employees, state employees, school employees. The auditor has put forward a proposal that a few other states are working on around, I think it's called reference-based pricing. And I can share that information with you if that's helpful. And that's sort of one option for how to actually use the fact that these are negotiated statewide as a way of lowering costs, and sort of having, basically the state has buying power to control costs. I don't know that much about it, but I've now reached my limit and can forward more
It's
information.
about 12% of our budget.
Yeah.
It used to be 5.
And I think that's true for almost every business or government agency in the state right now.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. Or like people's individual personal budgets.
I just wanted to ask of you, what are you, what can we do, or what do you need us to do in terms of advocacy or information? Is there anything that you want to leave us with in terms of calls to support?
Thanks. I really like the biggest message I'm trying to communicate is it's like a very shared responsibility. Like this is something that the legislature can't like magically solve. I don't even know what solving it would look like, to be honest with you. It's not something that you all can individually solve. It's not something that voters can individually solve. It's not something that the administration can individually solve. There was a time, actually pre-Act 46, I'm gonna bring it up again, that Shumlin actually, as governor, called on voters all across the state to vote down their school budgets. I don't want that to happen. That's a terrible nightmare from my perspective. That is not good for anyone. It's not good for kids, it's not good for schools, it's not good for school boards, it's not good for voters, it's not good for communities. So I think that like this is something we all just like need to be really careful and thoughtful about. I think the more we can communicate like what schools need from us right now is really helpful. And that like we're all gonna go, that it's a hard line in these times to not be to be thoughtful and cautious and not be scared and reactive. And I want us to stay away from scared and reactive, but I also don't want us to pretend that like this is gonna be easy. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Nancy Weiss, and I'm the director of the Windham Regional Career Center.
Hi.
Hi, so I just want to put in a plug for changing the funding formula for career centers, and I also want to put in a plug. We have an amazing CTE team at the AOE, made up of 4 individuals, 2 of which are only assigned to CTE part-time. And Ruth Durkee is just a powerhouse of information and resource for us as the leader of that group. But they're managing 17 CTE centers and Perkins funding and multiple other things. And so I'd just like to put in a plug, A, for the changing the funding formula, and B, for making sure that CTE at the AOE gets some more support, because I'm really worried we'll lose Ruth, and if Doug retires, we'll be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, staffing at the AOE is really, really hard. They refuse positions that the legislature offers them. They sometimes don't hire positions that we create. That's like one of the more political areas of happening. And there's a report that just came out about how to reform the CTE system. I imagine you've read it, and I'd be really happy to talk to you about it in more depth, because the report isn't like actionable, as there's a lot that still needs to be figured out, and it's not clear how we're gonna figure that stuff out in a way that has enough stakeholders and move fast enough, so I'd love to talk to you about it. For instance, like, how do we count the students at the CTE centers? Do we weight them or do we not weight them? Right. The weights. Yeah.
Any other questions?
If I could just, on that topic that we just mentioned, encourage the legislature to reconsider that model of a political appointee as the Secretary of Education. It's so clear that since that occurred, the capacity of the education to provide us with models of success that can be scaled up and implemented has been drastically diminished. And it seems like a consistent trend. There doesn't seem to be a war.
From I think the Board of Education has gotten much more political over that time.
Yep.
That's really hard. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me.
So we are going to move on from that conversation, which I'm sure everyone can totally explain everything. Or most people will go back and listen to the BCTV, and
I also have like PowerPoints and like write-ups. I can send you so many things if you want.
anything you want to send to us, we will, we can ask, have it, you know.
Okay, only if you
post it
want.
on our- Absolutely.
Okay.
More information is wonderful.
Okay, not always better, but wonderful.
Hopefully it will help things make sense to everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
So we will move on to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of November 28, 2023?
So moved.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion?
Yes. I'd like to amend the minutes. It's a brief mention on page 5 saying that the 3 policies that were voted on for readoption at the last meeting, that they had gone through 3 readings. They only went through 2 readings before they went up for readoption. So I just want to correct that for the record, please.
Okay.
That's on page 5.
So there's been a motion to amend the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. We are now back to the,
That was just for the amendment.
now we're back to the amendment.
Oh, I see.
I mean, now we're back to the
motion.
amended minutes. Is there any further discussion on the amended minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of the approving the minutes as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. We are moving on to the warrants and payrolls. If you looked at the agenda initially, there was one date in there that needed to be corrected, so I'm going to read it as it has been amended on the, as it has been posted on the amended agenda. So, is there a motion to approve the warrants of November 13, 2023 in the amount of $221,576.31? November 20, 23 in the amount of $185,933.03. November 27, 2023 in the amount of $109,589.97. December 4, 2023 in the amount of $1,037,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at I'm looking at one of the items. $1,037,697.39. My apologies. And the payrolls for November 17, 2023 in the amount of $1,799,044.03, and December 1, 2023 in the amount of $1,665,743.58. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the warrants and payrolls as listed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. We are now moving on to public comment, non-agenda items. Anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories. Receive an acknowledgement of the comment with no further action planned. Receive an immediate response by the board chair or administration. Administration will be directed to contact and respond to the person. Clarification sought from the administration for a specified meeting. Topic would be added to a specified future board agenda. The matter would be referred to an executive session. A public hearing will be held on the matter. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment in public comment non-agenda items? Okay, going twice. Public comment non-agenda items. And the third time. Okay, we are moving on. Okay, so now we are into the unfinished business. I will say sexual abuse investigation. I have not had the opportunity to reach out to Kendall, host our attorney, to see if she's had any response. But we have another board meeting next week, so hopefully I will make a commitment to do that this evening. Is there any?
There's a hand up.
I see that Mindy has her hand up. Hold on just a moment, Mindy. Anyone on the board who? Okay, so Mindy.
I just want to clarify, are you stating your intent to hopefully present something next week?
I am stating that I did not have the opportunity to reach out to our attorney with, and see if there was a further response that I could provide to the public or to the.
There's another meeting next week. Is that rescheduled or a change in schedule because of the holidays? Is that?
We have ordinarily we would have our next board meeting on next Tuesday based on school vacation, I believe is the following week. So we would be meeting next Tuesday. We're actually meeting next Wednesday because there were some, I believe there were some conflicts in some of the administration or there's some scheduling conflicts. So this board is available to meet on Wednesday, just after the WSESU board meeting. So I would encourage everyone who is expecting to attend this meeting to also appear a little early and attend that meeting as well. So I would hope that I would have something. I don't know whether it's gonna be anything of substance that will answer any large questions, but I will certainly make an effort to have something that I can at least respond to you, whether I've heard from our attorney or not heard from our attorney or whatnot, so. Jody, you have your hand up?
Yes, just as a member of the public, and I know the board has been working very hard, but this investigation is just going on forever. And it is frustrating for a lot of people who aren't speaking up, but they're very frustrated with it. And Mindy has stayed with you all this time. So somehow it's got to get broken and get out to the public. So thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Anyone else who would like to comment on that topic before we move on? Okay. Thank you both for your comments on that, and we're moving on to continuation of food accessibility at district schools. We are a few minutes behind. I did budget 15 minutes for that, but there were some board members who asked to have somewhat of a follow-up, so if we can try to keep to 15 minutes. Is there anyone who would?
I know there was an article in the Reformer that related to the district meeting that I think Frank, you attended with Fresh Picks. Could you give us your own update on that? But at the last meeting, you were like a day before you were going to sit down with them. So could you report out on what that?
I'll start and you can jump in. So yeah, we had scheduled a meeting with Fresh Pets prior to the November break. So then that meeting happened. So we met, myself, Frank, Susan Grabowski, and Hannah Parker met with Fresh Picks leadership. We shared very explicitly the concerns that we had, the feedback that we had received from students specifically, and some families. We put a number of things in place during that meeting in terms of more immediate stopgaps. And one of those was reassigning some positions up at the high school to ensure that we don't run out of food on any given day. So literally one of the chefs has the very next day took on this role of like monitoring the line and the food to ensure that like we're not running out. We also extended lunch period C for a longer period of time. So they would not start packing up the food 10 minutes earlier than they had been doing. So those are some of the immediate changes. We also talked about establishing some new options like a burrito bowl option for kids. They did share that they were having some staffing issues. We talked about the concept of marketing and really talking to our kids so that they know that as an organization, like you care about the feedback that you're receiving. So that's reflected in not only your actions, but in how you respond through the menus. They potentially will write an article in response to these last few weeks in the next newsletter, school newsletter. They've shared 2 surveys with us, a survey to go home for families, and then a survey to go out to students, an elementary version and a upper high school, middle school version. I haven't got the updates on those emails. I saw some email chains today, but I think Susan and Hannah were giving some feedback on those questions. So those surveys should be going out shortly as well. And then there's some more long-term goals around hiring more staff. We've connected Fresh Picks with our Human Resources Department to collaborate a bit on getting the word out. We've shared our referral process that we have in place right now, and the concepts around grow your own, and how Fresh Bits could benefit from that in terms of a collaboration. So, we didn't solve all of the concerns and all of the issues that were raised, but I would say positive steps have been taken in the immediate, and we've agreed to meet again probably middle of January, just to kind of see where we're at. So it's not like a one and done. We're going to continue to monitor and check in to see how we're doing. Another program we want to start sooner than later is an after-school snack program at the high school. That's not in place, but I think
Starting tomorrow.
There we go. Okay. So.
We had one student sign up.
Yeah, but news will move, especially through the athletic programs and the arts programs that we offer after school. There's a lot of kids on campus after school, so when they start seeing that food's available, I gotta believe we'll be taking advantage of that. And then the other thing that is up and running is the share cooler. Hannah really initiated that. So we're looking at training the kids in how to really go through the line, grab the food that you can. If you're not going to eat it, you can still put it in the share cooler. And that's a way of supporting your community because somebody else can benefit from that. I don't know if I got it all, but that's kind of...
And Hannah, have you seen a positive in your perspective?
Definitely, I think the, I would say the salad bar is way better stocked. Like it's constant. You don't have to go in and say, okay, can you please refill stuff? And that was what Mark was speaking to, that there's one employee who's focused on just making sure that the line, everything's full. And I agree that the after school piece is going to be significant, and hopefully that will catch on.
I will say it's pretty hard to get positive responses about cafeteria food from students, but Deborah and I met with the student advisory committee. We couldn't believe how happy they were about the immediate changes that they saw. The more variety of food, more food, faster. They were very positive.
Burrito got high reviews.
Yeah.
And they commented that there was a greater quantity of food.
Yes.
So that was great. And that third seating actually had a more expansive array of choice.
So thank you for your good work with Fresh Picks.
Yeah, we'll stay on top of it.
Yeah, thank you for that work. That's awesome. Sounds like there's some immediate impacts. And I didn't want the board to lose sight of what potentially could have been impacted by some of these changes, but was what I understood a separate issue of teachers potentially spending their own money to augment food for staff. And I wonder if y'all had sort of insight or thoughts about that and could update us.
Yeah, I think I don't really have any specific insight to that one, but I think investing in the concept of a shared cooler and really creating a community spot where kids can go get extra food is a way to.
Yeah, in my understanding, that wasn't a pervasive issue. It was really a specific program where certain kids are not comfortable in the cafeteria, and so that that program was being facilitated in a different way. We spoke specifically about that as well, and there's a way to accommodate that as well.
I have a question about Putney Central. One of the Leadership Council comments in the board report, I believe it was from Putney Central, they said that they have similar issues.
I think it was from Academy. It
was
wasn't
that
Putney Central.
Putney's the one that doesn't use Fresh Picks, their own.
I think it was. I think it was either I think it was Academy School.
Yeah, so one of the schools said they had similar issues, one of the elementary schools.
Yeah, I checked in with Academy specifically about that. They're currently on their third cook of the year, so there's been a lot of turnover and transition. Latest feedback I've received, they're very happy with the new chef, and systems are beginning to be developed and things are getting a bit better. But yes, this was not just at the high school. There were elements of this in our elementary schools as well, not as prominent as the high school, but.
Eva?
One of the feedbacks I gotten was that some of the food the children just don't like it. Like for instance, the overnight oats. They're not particularly fond of that. So I'm wondering if there is some conversations. There was one other conversation about like turkey sandwiches, but it was just turkey and bread. It didn't have anything extra in it. So I'm wondering if there's like conversations about changing the food to what the kids like, so that we don't have waste from that.
That's a good point, Eva. That was an element of our meeting, and we really asked a question: Can you share what are the products that the kids are really into that you get rave reviews from, and let's really target those opportunities and maybe create more of them. That's where the concept of the survey came into play as well, in terms of getting some formal data, some formal feedback of what are the items that are really popular, and then how can that feedback be reflected in future menus. But that's a great point. It's very important. And that goes back to the marketing and engaging with the customers, which are our kids.
Hannah, did you?
Same idea, but also there are multiple options during all lunches, and I don't know if I'm assuming it's the same at the elementary school level. It was when I worked in the elementary school, but they had, you can have salad bar, you can have a sandwich, you can have pizza, and you can have hot lunch. So there's a minimum of 4 options for students to choose from.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just add to that in the discussion I had, and I could be wrong, there didn't seem to be many options. It seemed to be that was it, and the kids were just not. They're just saying, okay, we're not having those oats, and maybe there was an apple or something that they could grab. But there seemed to be a conversation, like for instance, French toast sticks. I don't know much about the French toast sticks, but apparently they loved the French toast sticks.
They did love the French toast sticks, and because of the wellness policy, the French toast sticks went away this year. But they do every day they have breakfast sandwiches with or without meat. They have a yogurt parfait or overnight oats, depending upon the day. They have fresh muffins. They have a fruit option. They have applesauce, juice, milk.
I think the difference at some of the elementary schools is that it's an ordering system. So sometimes a student may order a certain lunch, and when they go to get the lunch, actually like the other thing better. But it's just the way the system is kind of built. Not all of our schools have full kitchens and cafeterias like the high school, middle school.
Anything else on this topic before we move on?
I just wanted to pass on something that we talked about this a little bit at the Academy Leadership Council, and one of the things that the principal brought up was that, kind of like related to what you just mentioned, Hannah, sometimes the guidelines that we have are district-specific guidelines that in some ways are like more strict than the FDA or USDA guidelines, can make sourcing the ingredients difficult. So that was one thing that Kelly said was they were running into with the chef at Academy, that sometimes like the jam or whatever it was like had an ingredient or a percentage of sugar that was like higher than our district guidelines. So they had to they couldn't use like the Cisco things that they would just order easily. They would go to the grocery store and look for something that met these specific guidelines. So I wonder if there's some areas where we can look for in consultation with Fresh Picks about like where are we running into trouble meeting these guidelines, and is there some kind of adjustment that could be made to make it a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's always a slippery slope when you start to lessen the expectation. So
yes, it just seems like with the staffing issues, adding like an additional like run to the chopper to get jam is like beyond their capacity right now.
Yeah, I think like everything is just like really analyzing systems that are in place, and maybe there's just some inefficiencies that need to be addressed through corporate to assist with what's happening on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, well, we are moving on now. We are trying to make up some time, but unfortunately, I amended the agenda and I went right past when I was going to do that.
Right.
So, thank you, Anne, for reminding me. So we're gonna go back to the curriculum department, upcoming changes, so we're gonna really try to stick to 15 minutes on this topic, so.
I'll do an overview, and I know Kelly had forwarded the vision and then job description of the new position. And I did receive 3 questions that I was able to get to at the end of the day with the team effort at Central. So I'll give you the hard copies of some of the responses to those questions, and then I'll just speak generally to the vision. And if you haven't heard, I'm sure you have by now. A couple of weeks ago, Paul Smith made a final determination that he will indeed plan to retire at the end of this school year. Paul had alerted myself and Frank that could be a possibility at the end of last school year. But he wasn't necessarily ready to make that final decision. However, being the professional that Paul is, wanted to give us that heads up that it was could very much happen, and give us the time to kind of plan for that potential departure. So throughout the summer months and throughout the fall, we've been meeting regularly with Paul, really getting a fine understanding of all of the hats that Paul wears and and how his position has naturally changed over time. And Paul has a really unique skill set. We see that through the budgeting process, the consolidated federal grant program, Title I, Title II, all the other titles, as well as supporting our IT department, doing work around multiple sources of data, as well as curriculum coordination, instruction and assessment. So kind of naturally over time, in these past 2 years, Paul's really assumed kind of like the back of the office responsibilities, while Bryn has been more at the front of the office in terms of direct engagement with teachers, although Paul does that too. So ultimately, the challenge is, okay, well, with every departure, there's also an opportunity. So let's think about how we could approach this moving forward. So after much deliberation, we created a vision to support the curriculum office in all of our schools moving forward, with some more clarity around responsibility. And I think of this concept of, okay, we're a school system. And that question that we often ask ourselves is, are we a system of schools, of individual schools, or are we a true school system? I think we're both, but I think this vision brings us a step closer into a unified school system where we have a pre-K through 12 approach in how we're coordinating and planning our resources and curriculum coordination amongst all of our schools and preschools. So the vision is we would, currently what we have right now in this year's setup through the curriculum office is we have 2 curriculum coordinators, just described the kind of front of the house, back of the house with Bryn and Paul, supported by 3 coaches out of the curriculum office. Moving forward, one of our coaches has moved on to another opportunity outside of our school district. So moving forward, the proposal for the SU board, to hopefully approve tomorrow night, is that we would continue with a 5-person structure. We would just change what that structure looks like. So essentially we would go from 2 curriculum coordinators and 3 coaches to the very new position of Director of Curriculum and Instruction and Assessment, who would be the direct supervisor of the curriculum office and would supervise and evaluate 2 curriculum coordinator positions, Each of those curriculum coordinator positions would be defined by very clear roles, where one curriculum coordinator's responsibility would be on pre-K through grade 6. The other curriculum coordinator would be focused strictly on a 7 through 12 coordination. And then we would support those curriculum coordinators with 2-coach model moving forward. So again, still 5 members, just a new position, more clarity around curriculum coordination at the elementary, and then at the middle school, high school. I think this answers a lot of problems we've heard through feedback, through the NEASC process, but also just from what we know is that historically, our curriculum office has really focused on focusing on the elementary school development, and the high school, more so the high school, has been a bit siloed over the years in terms of department heads really controlling the curriculum for each of the subject areas, with not a lot of collaboration with the centralized curriculum unit. So I think this vision increases oversight and evaluation of curriculum. It differentiates roles to more specific outcomes to the elementary and then to the middle school, high school. And I feel really good about it. I've shared this concept with union leadership, who is very much in favor. Hannah and I have talked about this with her team. Hannah, feel free to jump in, but the response from folks specifically at the high school was, thank you, this is really what we're looking for, some more direction. And we have been moving in that area the past 2 years, like we certainly have. But this will help us, take that next step in terms of developing a pre-K through 12 coordinated school system.
Yeah, and I would say just historically, Dummerston, Putney, and BAM's all feeding the high school from within our own district. There's definitely been it depends on which school you're coming from, what curriculum you're using, so on and so forth. I don't know how much communication happens between middle school and high school teachers. It's pretty limited, so we're kind of, as Mark said, on the silo island by ourselves, kind of doing our own thing. And I think aligning our district pre-K through 12 will be critical to graduation rates, test scores, social emotional well-being, all of it. I think it's, I'm very excited about the possibility of the high school getting more support.
What exactly did NEASC point out that there was a need for?
Curriculum. Aligned curriculum within our building.
Just that?
Well, I mean, that's one of the 4 areas.
Okay. I do want to say that conversation with Emily pointed out the importance of availing of federal grant funding as much as possible, which it seems like we're doing a very good job. So I'm optimistic that we can continue with that under this model. So thank you for getting that started, Paul. One thing, it's a minor point, but in the job description, shouldn't oversight evaluation of the 2 curriculum coordinators be written in the job description?
The word oversight is in the job description, but we could certainly add evaluation supervision.
So as Mark mentioned, this is just sort of as an FYI, because we are affected by that, all the changes coming up. And Vernon presumably had a similar conversation at their meeting last night, and it will actually go back to the SU tomorrow night for the SU to vote on it.
And we'll share, had the discussion with Vernon last night, and full support was shared in terms of the immediate feedback. So,
and I will too say what I just had a minute to scan through your responses to these questions, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much the positions are supported by Title I, other federal grants. No, you know, we go through hundreds of pages of budget information, and this stuff flies by. So sometimes you just have to really focus on those areas that you're trying to change.
Any other comments, questions before we move on?
I really appreciated the write-up that was sent to us, and I think particularly Paul, this is kind of aimed at you. I think personally, I think the movement that we've seen in terms of the focus on curriculum standardization has been great over the past few years, and that you've given the warning to, you know, and also that you're really having an active voice and trying to form what the next steps are is very admirable, and I really appreciate it. And so thank you for sharing all this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. He's not going anywhere. We're still going to find ways to utilize his wisdom as we make this transition. So,
just one more question, sure. For Hannah, perhaps. But for years, we've talked about enhancing the civics education curriculum. Would this model enable the high school person to focus a little more on civics education?
What do you mean by that?
There's a bill that's been lingering in Montpelier forever to require a better civics education course in high school. And simply that, would the curriculum coordinator for the high school be able to focus on assessing and enhancing civics education to engage students more with?
I mean, I think it's all part of the same position. Sorry, I'm just looking up the name of this course right now. But starting this school year, every 10th grader is taking, I don't want to say the name wrong, Diversity, Equity, and Civic Action. So that's a required course for all 10th graders to take. And the Social Studies Department is constantly looking and providing new offerings for civic classes, for social studies, for all kinds of, I think next year they're teaching Women in U.S. History is going to be a new class that's being offered. I don't remember exactly, but this has been a change in the last 2 years, or the last year, I guess.
but I think to your point, in addition to that, is having a central office resource that is really dialed in and focused on curriculum development on this campus is just only going to increase capabilities for collaboration and doing that type of work and making the connections to what's happening in our elementary schools, so that we are having that clear pre-K through 12 approach.
Yeah, we've all heard the lament across the nation about how students graduate from high school without knowing how government works, what the 3 branches are, basic information like that.
I used to teach that class.
Well,
back in the day.
Okay, so it looks like we're ready to move on. Back to policy and amendment.
Oh, that's me, sorry. Oh boy, policy and amendment. So on behalf of the Policy and Amendment Committee, I move for readoption of D1, personnel recruitment, selection, appointment, and background checks. And just as a sidebar, it has gone through 2 readings.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve D1 personal recruitment, selection, appointment, and background checks. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving D1 personal recruitment, selection, appointment, and background checks, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Deborah?
So again, the policy committee presents for a second reading, F32, student distribution of literature. So this is for a second reading.
Okay, so for a second reading, is there any discussion on that one? Okay, we are moving on to new business. Deborah.
Okay. Next one is coming up for a first reading, and it's D7. This is really interesting. Volunteers and work study students. This was first recently readopted November 8, 2022. So it's come full circle again pretty quickly. There were comments in this policy under administrative procedures, especially, that noted February 1st, 2023. Well, we've gone beyond February 1st, 2023 in terms of requiring fingerprinting of volunteers who are driving students to off-site school events. Some significant changes. Number one, if you have already been fingerprinted, you've done it. That's it. You do not need to do it again. If you do need to be fingerprinted, just a reminder, the district pays that fee. So if you are in that position, please get to the district office and go through the procedures. Every volunteer who has been cleared to drive students to off-site school events, they must go through a level 1 background check every 12 months. This is an electronic checking system that's done at the central office. Mm-hmm. So again, if you have already been fingerprinted, you only needed to do it once. If you do need to be fingerprinted, you can go to any sheriff's office in the state of Vermont. So if you look at this policy, you'll see the changes in red running throughout the policy. I think I have highlighted the significant changes in this policy. So it is being presented for a first reading, volunteers and work study students. The second policy that is being presented for a first reading is F36, which is F36, which is student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media. This is being presented for a first reading, and there is actually one change in this policy, and it is being very specific, audio-visual recordings. So please take a look at both policies and comment, question, get back to committee members. Thank you.
Okay, we are now on to board matters. So a couple of these are just points of sort of just to get it on your radar, keep it on your radar, just so the C and D are, but A is Leadership Council updates. Do we have any Leadership Council updates?
I'll give a brief update. We had our second orientation, since I've reported out in the first one. It's a very good meeting, collaborative meeting. Went through the same process that I'd shared at after our first orientation. One of the things that came out through the second orientation was just this appreciation for having some time to hear from other Leadership Council chairs at other schools. And so Mo Hart and I proposed a thought of should we have another check-in throughout the school year, not as an orientation, but just as how are things going, what are certain councils working on, how we can how can we collaborate and just share, just network with each other. And that was very well received. So the response to that was, yes, we would like that. So I think the thought is that at some point early in March, we would host another leadership council opportunity for chairs to come together at central office and just go through a process of sharing what's working well, what are the challenges, and ways to support each other moving forward. It's still a very new concept. So,
has there been a response to the stipends being offered to the staff join the LSA?
Yeah, shared that with the union. Very happy. Now it's just getting it out there and establish it as part of our after-school program system, which should be very easy. Yeah, appreciation for sure, and moving forward with that.
Any other leadership council updates?
I just wanted to share one other comment from the Academy Leadership Council when we were talking about the food issues. It was noted that the elementary schools have a lot in place to feed kids outside of the lunch hour, like snacks, sending home backpacks of food on the weekend and school breaks, food pantries, the share cooler, and it seems like there's less of that at the secondary level. So that was kind of a hope that we could have those resources equalized across the district available to all kids.
Yeah, so we got the share cooler up and running. After school snacks are habit starting tomorrow. We did share the concept of exploring a backpack program and developing one at the high school.
They got them.
They got
I
them.
heard that. I can't remember how many, but I heard today that they got, I'm gonna say 100 backpacks.
Okay, great. So that's in process. So yeah, that was part of our check-in meeting with Fresh Picks as well.
Great. And do they have those things at BAMS too? The cooler and the backpacks and that sort of thing?
I don't.
The meeting was really focused on the high school,
It was.
so I'd have to look further into that.
Because a lot of these things aren't related to Fresh Picks, but just to, these are hungry kids in our community and can we get them more food?
I know from the BAMS leadership council meeting, when we brought up, that you were having a discussion with Fresh Picks, none of the parents there nor Keith had, none of the students in BAMS had complained that they were hungry during the day, but there was interest. The parents thought it would be a very great program if we offered the backpack program for BAMS students, for the kids and the students that have food sensitivity issues.
Yeah, there's really no reason to recreate it at BAMS. We should just develop one backpack program.
And it could be what they got for campus. I don't know if that conversation happened, but.
So we need to follow up on
Any other leadership council updates? Okay, we are moving on to board subcommittees. Any board subcommittee updates? Ruby.
Hi. So the Communications Council did meet and there are minutes posted, but just a few highlights which are directly kind of flowing from the conversations we had at our last meeting. We did discuss the shared Google Drive that we have, developing a shared foldering system that hopefully we can develop and start to utilize. So I think Matt's gonna spearhead and probably has spearheaded that. But so stay tuned for more information. And we expect it will be a hill to climb to get us on board with it all. But that was exciting. And then there were some suggestions from the public, Jody Normando particularly around tutorials for the website or synopsis on Act 173 and then an acronym cheat sheet. Those were all ideas and those were discussed and some of those we realized existed and so we linked to them in the website or in the minutes and discussed how do we roll that out and make sure the public knows about it. I don't think we have a concrete I don't have anything to tell you right now that there's an action plan, but we did discuss that. There are ways in which some of rolling that out may not be the board communication council. It may be pointing to it to the district level in terms of central office, how to share. And but we did have an idea that was shared around developing possibly video tutorials around the website. What that looks like, who does it, is still a question, but that was a thought. And I would say the biggest thing we talked about and did in the meeting was develop a draft survey for the feedback loop for leadership councils, which we haven't yet shared with Mark, but I'll do that after this meeting. And the hope in that was to just have a starting point for that survey, so that hopefully Mark can tweak it and send it out. And we did. Mo wasn't able to be at the meeting, but I had some conversations with her and brought it back. But I think that overall, my sense is that there's a general acknowledgement that central office is doing a great job at trying to get a handle on community engagement, the newsletter, and also being very receptive to feedback. And there is some feedback that's been kicking around, that, like, related to the district calendar. We talked about the email lists and refreshing those, so people are staying informed. All of those things are really an easy conversation between the public and the communications council and Mo and central office, which is great. So that's really that was the feedback. And we don't meet very often, so that's why it's a big report out, because we don't really have a plan to meet unless we have to meet, and this was our big meeting. So
thank you. Thanks for putting a survey together.
Yeah.
I just wanted to elaborate on one thing that Ruby said, which was about the shared drive, which I think we initially had just talked about using that to contribute to a resource about subscription ideas. But Ruby was saying that we could also use it to communicate the stuff that we send between meetings instead of on email. So, like, putting in there the presentations that get sent out to everyone, that, like, Mark could just be able to, like, drop those in there for the board instead of having to send everything through Kelly and then have more emails for her to send out to everyone that we could, and it would just make it much easier for us when we wanted to go back and be like, where was that presentation, or the whatever, that we could just open on our drive and find, like, the November 14th meeting and everything's in there, and we could even, like, load in the agendas and the minutes in there so that there's, like, an easy way for our board members to keep track of stuff that we've discussed.
Okay. Any other committee groupie?
I just wanted to let everyone know that the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee meeting is meeting on Monday, and we have some, just as a reminder, our focus is really from a board perspective to look at all of the schools in the district and how programs are implemented across them. And it's to then, as we see things, pull in and engage with the administration on problem solving to whatever extent the board is able to help. So the focus that we're starting, which is really in the seed form, is a topic that's coming up a lot around equity to food access across the district. We have so many schools, and as we see, there's different implementation. So the purpose of the meeting is not to really do anything other than, like, exploratory, what can we look at, how is it going? And so to whatever extent we can be helpful in gathering information and sharing it both amongst ourselves as a board, but also with the administration, that's the goal. So that will be happening, and we rotate meetings, and so we will be meeting at Academy School at 5 o'clock on Monday.
Okay, I'll ask one more time before we move on. Okay, so I'm not hearing any. So the last two items on the agenda are just, I didn't put very much time on there because I didn't really anticipate that we would have a lengthy discussion on either one of them. It's just a notice that next meeting, I anticipate to have a more lengthy discussion. And I it would be good to have people prepared for that. So
I'm sorry, I missed that. What?
the board budget
Yeah.
and the administrative assistant to the SD board. Those two, I put them on the agenda because I wanted to put people on notice that next
Can I make a?
Next week.
Next meeting, we will have a more full discussion on them, but I wanted to point out that I sent, I've asked for people to look at the board's budget and see if we can figure out what it is we think we need. We are of course going to be mindful of the increase in the, money that people are already going to be expected to be putting towards this, but we do need to make sure that we have somewhat of a proposal to send to Frank, and so he can include it in the budget for our section. Ruby, did you have a question?
I do. This is just kind of a point of information. Are we not at the next meeting considering a draft budget, or am I ahead of the game?
We vote on the 23rd of January. That's
okay.
when we vote to approve the budget. So we still have a couple meetings, but we need to have it to Frank at least a week before. I'd like to have it 2 weeks before for Frank. It's not really nice to throw something at him at the last minute, so I'm sure he'll have other things to be keeping him busy. So I'd like to come to that meeting next Wednesday, with our thoughts on how we think that the budget, our portion of the budget, should be comprised, based on the needs of a lot of the things that we are having to address.
Kelly?
Sure.
I'll just say this. It's nobody's fault, but these meetings, there's just not enough time to discuss important things that really need further discussion. The last meeting we had a wonderful start to understand MLSS, with the understanding that there would be a follow-up Q&A. That's not going to happen soon, I think.
It'll happen next board meeting.
And like the SEL presentation we just had, I'm sure we have a lot of questions about that, but there just wasn't time.
And that will be next board meeting as well.
Okay, next board meeting is going to be
Yep, I've already let
big one.
Mark, I think he's already on notice that, so if you do have any questions any further questions on the MLSS and or the SEL from this evening, send them along, forward them to Mark. He can be prepared for next meeting.
Thank you.
So, you're
You
welcome.
want board members to send them to you, and
Yes.
then you would collate and
Yes,
send
yeah.
it to me? Okay.
Yeah. So the last one, the administrative assistant to the WSESD board. Now, keeping in mind that we obviously need to be mindful of our budget, the greater budget, what people are going to be expected to pay, how changing finances are. I feel the need to look back on the number of the school boards before we had this merger. And each of the different towns can think about how many people were on their school boards at that time. I know in Guilford, I believe, had 5. So, and I think Frank and Mark and Paul maybe Anne can probably remind me. So we had each of the Brattleboro town schools had their own.
We had 5.
So you had
5 members
For Bratttown.
for Bratttown.
For each.
For all three schools.
The whole town
plus-
was one school district.
Yes.
We didn't have separate boards.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. But then you had BAMS, and then you had BUHS.
That was a separate board. The BAMS and BUHS was a separate one.
Okay. So, and then did you have EES?
That was in Bratttown.
That was Bratttown.
Okay. So, but I guess my point is that when you add all these people up, when they did the merger, they've kind of squished us all into a smaller number of people. We fortunately, we did have 2 more added from Brattleboro to help sort of spread the wealth of the work. But that means it's 10 of us that are doing the work of all the boards. And I think we try to do a good job of having committees that are responsive to the needs of the community, the needs of the administration. Each board member is on at least one committee, potentially more. They're on a leadership council. So we are all doing more. And the community's needs for us to continue to serve them and provide information and be informed and reach out to the professionals who we need to reach out to and have all that time to do that. I believe that everyone on this board is either A, working, or B, working as a retired person, and we all have lives. We all have things outside of this board and outside of our jobs that we're doing. And so we all work really hard to make sure that we fill our role. And I think this idea of having an administrative assistant that works directly with the school board was actually brought up some time ago, but it's come back up again, and again, being mindful of the expenses. I think I don't serve the school board or the administration or the community, the students. I don't serve any of you well when I don't do all that is necessary for as the chair. All the board members may run into this at some time in their service. And so I would ask the board to seriously consider the proposal that was sent out. And it is a proposal, so it's something that we would need to consider if we want it to start in the next term. We need to fine tune it and figure out what it would come down to as far as finances, and we would need to get it in our budget. So I would ask everyone to really look at the proposal and see if and how you feel it would serve the school board and the administration, being able to streamline things, and also the community, and the students, So I don't know if anybody, I've probably spoken the whole 5 minutes, but if anybody would like to speak on either the budget or the administrative assistant.
So I'd just like to say that when I became a board member and I listened to all of the webinars and all of the trainings provided by the VSBA, one of the things that was said again and again is, oh, we're introducing this, but you'll never, ever encounter it. It just will not take place. The reality is, it has taken place. We have been hit with extraordinary circumstances, and there are so many threats that exist at the same time. I actually went online to look at a board, a way of tracking the different threads. Like a traffic board, with pegs all over the place. Not the Post-its that I have all over it's just amazing, and I still lose threads. I think about the to-do list that would make our jobs so much better, and by our jobs, I mean the welfare of every student. That's what we're about. The to-do list. Just on the issue of policy, the rotation of policies, Ruby looked at this at one point in terms of putting together a spreadsheet. Carrie is trying to pull it together. We need a spreadsheet. We need a way of looking at the rotation of policies every 3 to 5 years, because we're supposed to be reviewing them every 3 to 5 years. They need to be prioritized. We have an orientation manual that actually is a procedural manual. It doesn't exist online yet. We have no way of updating it. we have no effective table of contents. How to take it to that next level so that the onboarding of every new board member, so that the onboarding of an existing board member from year to year is solid and in place. So, but so many of us are already stretched to the limit where we have to practice saying, no, I can't do that. It's enough already. And yet that next, what you're saying no to is actually essential. I listened to Ruby talk about the 2 committees and wanting to take it a next step, but not really sure how to do it and who has the time to do it because it's adding on. So it isn't that the administrative assistant for the school board would take it all on, but would alleviate some of the push and the pull that exists for so many of us. Anyway, that's my impassioned plea to take a look at this. I know that, Kelly talks about that we have to be financially responsible. Well, yeah, true. But we also have terrific needs for our students. So it's that balancing act. Thank you.
I do, before we end the discussion, I do want to say how much I appreciate Mo and all she does. But Mo also has regular administration responsibilities. And so it almost feels like some of the needs, our needs, it seems unfair to ask those, to put that extra burden on Mo. She does a great job at the things that she helps us with, and she is very involved. I believe she's at all the policy meetings. She is always there to, answer questions, and she gets our agendas posted and our minutes and all that stuff. But she is involved with administration stuff too. So we can't. We can only impose so much on Mo, and so I don't want to burn her out.
And this has nothing to do with Mo, and this has nothing to do with Mo's responsibilities. This is the board's set of issues, very specifically. Anyway, I think we just want you to take a look at it.
So please take a look at it and send along any thoughts if you want, or you can bring them to the next meeting and we can just, okay. So I think, unless anybody has anything else, they would.
A new hire.
Okay, I didn't, is it the Career Center?
Yeah.
Nancy said it could go on to the next.
Okay.
She said, yeah, she's on the way up to it
No
because
problem.
it wasn't warned, so she's gonna send me an email and remind me about it. So thank you.
I just wanted to ask about one thing. A few meetings ago, there was a letter from the Dummerston Leadership Council about the really dire impact that the sub shortage is having. And then Mark, you said that you and Mike Kelleher were working on a plan to address that.
Yeah.
So I would love if we could have an update on how that's going. I don't know if it will fit on the agenda at the next meeting, but at some future meeting, if we could plan to hear about that.
Sure.
Because I know that's been an issue at all our schools.
If you can send it along with I think I have to get the agenda done pretty quickly, so if you.
I will send it to you right now. Okay?
All right. And Mark, I did not take the opportunity to thank you. This is a very thorough response, so that's much appreciated.
And Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? We are adjourned at 9:14. Thank you.